Hello everybody and welcome to the pull list for comics out on July 9th, 2025. We are catching up a little bit and you are not having a crisis, except for you kind of are. It's me, live from New Zealand, Crisis with a K. And if you've never seen this show before, welcome. And if you have, you know what's about to happen. We are going to talk about my top comic book series of 2025 so far. If you watched last week, you saw me do a whole top 60, but that was as of June 25th. This is as of July 9th. Get ready. Let's go. So, my number 20 series of the year, look, there's numbers now, is Doom Academy. Recently concluded, loved it very much. Number 19 is Avengers by Jed MacKay. Number 18, new in the top 20, Conan the Barbarian by Jim Zub and a variety of artists. Number 17, Absolute Superman by Jason Aaron and a variety of artists, but very importantly, colors to Ulysses Ariola and letterer Becca Carey. Number 16, we have Moon Knight. 15, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, also by Jason Aaron. 14, Wind by James Tynion and Michael Dionis. Number 13, Amazing Spider-Man, now written by Joe Kelly with art from Pepe Larraz and John Romita Jr. Number 12, Black Axe, it's Mouse Guard, Dawn of the Black Axe, recently concluded, loved it so much. Number 11, Ghost Box by Mike Carey and Pablo Ramondi and Jose Villaruba. Now we're into the top 10, Jedi Knights at number 10. At number 9, Detective Comics, new run by Tom Taylor. Number 8, Jump Scare from Cullen Bunn and Danny Luckert, it's so gorgeous. Number 7, Tin Can Society from Rick Remender's Giant Generator. Number 6, Doctor Strange of Asgard, concluded this week, so we'll get to talk about it. Number 5, FML by Kelly Sue DeConnick. Wait, you're used to seeing that. Number 1, what happened? Number 4, Out of Alcatraz. Number 3, Solomon Kane, also concluding this week. Number 2, we're taking everyone down with us from Image Comics, and the new number 1, replacing FML for the first time this year at the number 1 position, is Batman Dark Patterns by Dan Waters, Hayden Sherman, Triota Farrell, and Frank Sedovic. Okay, but wait, we're not done. This is not the end of what happens at the beginning of the show, because we also have my top picks of the week. If you just come away with 2 minutes worth of information, this is the 2 minutes you've got. So when I write about these series on Crushing Crisis, when I build my pull list, I try to pick out what my top picks of the week will be based on just hype levels, how much I've been enjoying the series recently. And then we have contact with the enemy, and we find out what my top picks of the week actually are. So let's go through. This week, I thought my top Marvel pick would be Legacy of Vader, Star Wars Legacy of Vader, and there were actually several very good books from Marvel this week, but my top pick of the week was, surprising a little bit, surprising not, depending on how you look at it, the new Fantastic Four number 1. I cannot wait to talk about both of those books. At DC, I skipped DC somehow. At Image, we have The Unchosen, I thought was going to be my number 1 of the week, with David Marquez's debut as a writer and artist, but it wasn't my favorite week of Image of all time, but the Power Fantasy, which I did not love, but I liked a lot, and that was my top pick of the week there. And then Indie, Solomon Kane, I just assumed, because it's been in my top 5, that it would be my pick of the week. There were 2 books vying for top pick of the week after I did my reading, actually 3, because I loved this. I loved another book, which you may have guessed, but I am not mentioning here, but actually it's another Patrick Zurcher book. He did the lead main story in the oversized Savage Sword of Conan, and I just thought it was incredible. Zurcher is really on a tear. Gosh, what happened to my DC books? Oh, there we go. DC pick of the week. I thought it would be Dark Patterns. I mean, it is my number 1 comic book of the year, but I just really have a lot to say about this Superman Treasury Edition 2025 Hero for All, written by Dan Jurgens, art from Bruno Redondo, and colors from Adriano Lucas. Okay, so now you have all of the truly essential information, but then comes the other 3 hours of the show, where I'm going to go through every one of the comics that was out this week, or not this week, the week of July 9th. We're getting closer. We're getting closer and closer. We're less than a month behind. But right now, I'm going to say hi to so many people who I've seen in the comments as we were getting ready for the show, and here is where I put on my glasses to have my face reveal, because I don't know what my face looks like yet until I put my glasses on. Okay, the makeup team can retain their job for 1 more week, perhaps. Okay, so let me just tweak some settings here. And then we will begin. Great, love it, love that for us. Okay, Let's see. Wow, who is in the chat? Super Jop with the first comment this week. Early post. I did. My goal is always to get the announcement of the live stream up 12 hours ahead so that people have time to be like, oh, right, Crisis is streaming today or tomorrow or whatever day it might be for you. And this is one of the first times. And so then I was able to do that. Super Jop and I went on to have a lengthy conversation about Zenescope Comics. Hank is looking forward to the stream, although we'll be busy at work. Raptor Rancher wants me to catch all the way up so I can talk about Captain America #2 by Chip Zdarsky. I love, and Valerio Schiti, and I believe colors by Frank Martin. I loved the first issue, so I cannot wait. Cool Angel saying, don't forget, you still might want to stay behind a week, because I was cheering about I might like to catch up. I want to be part of the discourse, y'all. I'm behind now, if you have not been keeping up all year, because I spent 2 months working on the Omnibus Most Wanted polls at near mint condition, and that was not only working on compiling the data for the 600 plus books that Marvel and DC have never printed before, but also writing, also read comics. So we've been trying to dig out of this 6-week backlog. And I keep saying, oh, maybe it would be nice to be 1 week behind. Maybe that would not be such a bad thing, because, maybe it wouldn't be as frantic. But then I miss on the discourse. I really want to be part of the discourse. Veined with the ... I don't know what that means. I've seen Vane do that before, but Vane, you're welcome here, as are your ellipses. Everyone loves an ellipsis here. Jamie C47 is here to summarize all the things I say in a much more efficient way. That is usually what happens. Cedric and Ellen are here. Bonsoir. They are just got thing number 2 and the variant cover, and lo and behold, that's their cat, Kuro, sitting on Ben Grimm's hand. Although, in the picture, we have learned the cats are named, oh no, what I'm gonna mess up, Monroe and Falco. I think. Okay, Yona Paulzer here is talking about the X-Men Messiah Trilogy Omnibus, which I'm not doing a Moment of Krisis about today, but I do certainly have opinions on, and you can see me have those opinions tomorrow. Already the internet's being weird. All right, let's see what we can do. Hold on. Am I still online? Looks like yes, but the internet is still weird. Y'all, when I tell you I am plugged into the internet, there's no more internet that I can get. All right, it looks like it bounced back. I am going to be on Mint Condition tomorrow. I forget what time, but y'all know how to find Near Mint Condition on YouTube, and I will be going through every one of the Marvel announcements with Omar. I'm just now digesting what they all are. I mean, I've been following them all individually, but I don't know that I've formed all of my opinions on them, so I have about 24 hours to do that, and then we're going to be going through all of them. Logan Wayne saying hello to me and the fellow Crushers. Patrick Borgeld saying is ready to talk about that last issue of Doctor Strange. Edwin Billiot, one of our very regulars, fascinating by how many people chime in early. I think it's just the habit. I don't think a lot of people put their live stream announcement up more than 5 or 6 hours ahead. Usually some big channels, but not a lot of people in the comic space. So I just think that people log into YouTube and there's just 12 whole hours to stop by and leave a comment. Helen's hello, love your is in my tippity top out of Alcatraz, and the ending really surprised me. Ooh, no spoilers because I still have 1 issue left. Kane saying good evening. Kane is my East Coast, United States, New Jersey friend. I see James Abel in there, but talking to other people. Kenneth Crayley, massive super fan of Superman, is here, and so I'm sure he will love that my favorite DC book of the week is Superman Treasury 2025. Can't wait to hear what you have to say about that. Georgie Chimchimov is here. James Abel, no hair and makeup check. Well, no, because I don't put the glasses on until you all see me with the glasses on. So that's how you know. Jamie C47 saying, I finally finished the first trade of Alyssa Wong's Psylocke. Story's fun enough, nice art, but I'm not sure the voice for Quanon, and since when did Quanon and Shinobi have any form of relationship? Well, I mean, they do have a form of relationship. That is canonical. But I do think the voice actually somewhat improves as we continue to the second one. Okay, we got to move on to Moment of Krisis. I'm just going to say hi very quickly to a few more people. Lance McNair, hello, says Murph. Hello, Ryan Wilson, who I talked to all weekend on the Near Mint Condition Discord, which if you pledge $5 or higher, I mean, I have a Patreon too, which many people were very kind to re-up their annual this weekend, because my Patreon is going to be getting a little tweaks to the pricing in a couple of weeks. So this is your last chance to get the super cheap, I think it's $20.30 for an annual that lets you unlock all of the guides. And so I do have a Patreon there, and it does pay for all of this nonsense, and as well as keeping Crushing Krisis afloat, which I know we haven't been looking at it that much recently because I've just been so so much about the catching up, but it costs a lot of money to run a website that big with that many visitors, and the Patreon is very, very helpful for that because I have stayed committed forever to not having ads on the website. Every so often, I'll do a post that has like a sponsored link or something in it, but that's like once or twice a year. Many people have asked at this point if they could advertise or if I could have their ad network, and in my opinion, it's like, you're there to escape that. It's an independently run website. We all hate going to websites and having to block ads. We hate doing that on Fandom. We hate doing that on League of Comic Geeks. We hate doing it everywhere, right? And there's certainly ads that are unavoidable on YouTube unless you pay for YouTube Premium. I never want to make my site a place where you're going to get information and then also you have to like move the ads aside to get the information. That to me is no fun. Why would you want to do that? I would not visit that site anymore, and there are plenty of sites I don't visit that have that experience. So even though I could make money off of it, have always been very committed that Crushing Krisis is going to be ad-free in terms of display ads. I mean, we all know that sometimes you click a link and it takes you to like Bozo's site to buy a book, but it's mostly there for informational purposes, so you can like see, oh, it's the cover of books. I don't have time to put, or space to put the cover of every single book on there, and it's easy to link to Bozo's site because it kind of works as a repository. Reader supported, and that's where our patreon.com/krisis comes in, which brings me back to the conversation I was already having, ADHD much, which is that I was talking to Ryan Wilson all weekend on the Near Mint Condition Discord, which is a Patreon benefit. I really want to have my own Discord, but my fear is that I would have so much fun talking to everybody that I would never read any more comics or work on Crushing Krisis. It's bad enough being on the Near Mint Condition one. I definitely spend time there that I should be spending working on Crushing Krisis. It's just easy because it's a scroll and there's comments just like this. And so I know that I have to have limited exposure to that, but boy, do I want to make one. I do. Okay, a few more hellos. Neil Pereira is here. Quincognito, excited that Dark Patterns is #1. Max Appleman, and I think, Aurora and Falco. You would understand why I think it's Monroe, because Aurora's last name is Monroe. Okay, and Paul Gundrum, who's a newer commenter, Biff Pompel. Oh my gosh, we're getting to the point that it's getting hard to say hello to everybody, which honestly is spectacular, but you know what? I will still do it, and you can just fast forward past this part of the stream when you're watching on a replay. Okay, it's time for Moment of Krisis. And nobody in the chat suggested one, so I guess I've got to go with the one that I've banked. So I was on the Reddits this past week, and I was talking about if people should buy Krakoa omnibuses, mapping of them notwithstanding, just like, are they worth buying? And the thing that I said is, look, it's a great story, and if they're going to come out in perfect reading order, that is a really big incentive to want to get them. But for me, personally, I don't see me rereading all of that ever again because I've already read it once. And I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't buy an omnibus to read something the first time. You should buy it if you're going to reread it or reference it, right? Or if it's just so prohibitively hard to read without an omnibus. Like these Valiant omnibuses, there is nowhere to get all of this digitally. So the omnibuses really are the best way. And you don't have to track all these 90s comments down physically. Krakoa, or anything else from 2004 and forward, unless it's Max from Marvel, is on Marvel Unlimited. And the subscription to Marvel Unlimited is only $100 a year-ish, give or take, depending on what level of subscription you get and where in the world you live. So much less in the United States. So, like, why would you buy 11 omnibuses if you could just read them digitally? And I'm somebody who doesn't have a big, it's got to be physical, it's got to be digital. I just want to read it in the way that's easy and affordable. And sometimes I have things I want to reread or reference all the time. And that's why they want to make it on the shelf. So a long preamble to say, what makes something rereadable? Why? We're not talking about these, which I'm going to experience for the first time, and this was the only way to get them. We're talking about something that I bought that I have read before, and I'm going to read again and again and again. One of those things is Wildcats, right? I read Wildcats back in the 90s. I reread it many times in the 90s. I probably read it again at some point in the 2000s while I pulled my old comics out of storage. I read it again in 2016, and I'm gearing to read it up again. I just like it. It's one of my favorite things. Doesn't mean it's the best comic ever. So why? What is the science? What makes a reread? And I'm very interested in all of your comments as well, which we'll get to after the Moment of Krisis. For me, to reread something or rewatch something or any kind of narrative media that we go back and re-experience, there's going to be a certain element to it that attracts you to absorb the story again, right? So it's a perfectly great narrative, well made, compelling, good looking, and it doesn't necessarily mean you want to experience it again. For me, experiencing it again, one of the first things is, am I going to get more from it if I experience it again, right? The person I was on Reddit with, we were talking about Immortal Hulk. Not my favorite series. Not something I'm desperate to own. Do I want to reread it though? Yeah, because I think I'm going to get a lot from Immortal Hulk the second time through, especially binging it all at once, that I did not get through reading it in 50 monthly installments, plus the zero, plus the absolute carnage. Not problems, not internet problems when I'm plugged to the. I think it's actually just my computer coming up on the limits of its lifespan, as we've established, unfortunately. So where were we? Oh yes. So there are books on my shelf that like you can get more from to read again. Books that are layered, books that are interesting. I mean, you can get more from a lot of Alan Moore comics, right? You can get more from a lot of Al Ewing comics. People whose names don't even just start with an A and an L. Kieran Gillen is somebody who I like to reread because there's layers, there's hints, there's literary references, right? Wonder Woman Historia, a book that I have physically on my shelf because I really thought I would reread it again, all for the reason of getting something more, right? So then there's something you read again because it just excites you and you want to get back that experience of excitement that you had the first time around, right? So, I mean, that's why we rewatch an action movie. Are we going to really understand a lot of new things about an action movie when we rewatch it again? Not necessarily, but it gets our heart pounding. I love rewatching Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. It's my favorite of the Mission Impossibles. I just think the stunts are incredible. It flows, it's quick, and it just, when he is clinging to the side of that building, my heart is just hammering every single time. So there are comics like that, right, that we buy because we want to reread them, not because they're going to like re-educate us, but because they're just exciting to reread. I would put Death and Return of Superman into that category, right? I've read it at least twice before. I'm looking forward to reading it again in Compendium. I don't know that I'm going to get a lot of deep meaning out of rereading it again. It's an action movie, right? So then there are things we reread again because they are just something about the art has a lot of merit. So sometimes it's just a beautiful book. And that's Wildcats falls a little bit into that category for me. Any Jim Lee, right? Like any Jim Lee. I just like my 90s Jim Lee. I'm going to read it just to experience Jim Lee's art again. So that's another reason too. And we could go on and on in the reread category, right? Another reason to reread things is because they're classic. They're formative. Even if we have them committed to memory, even if the art is not that great, even if there's nothing tricky about them, we're rereading them because they were influential, either on us or on the medium. It's what a lot of us have a favorite movie that we'll rewatch endless times because it was formative for us. For me, that is Clue. It is Ghostbusters. Not necessarily Clue formative to the medium, but formative to me. Whereas there are some movies like Star Wars: A New Hope, which were formative to the medium, and I probably could recite along to Star Wars: A New Hope. And so a lot of these epic collections for me fall into that category. Because the early epic collections, like especially the beginning of Spider-Man, certainly not Daredevil, is so formative to the comic book form. And so like that's rereadable. So, I would love to hear all of your reasons for why you find something rereadable. And the thing that I was taking it back to this originating conversation is, I think before you become the kind of person who has this collection, you have to know for yourself what is rereadable. Because I used to play the game of buying physical things to read them for the first time. That's what I did from 2010 to 2015, 2016. I bought every Marvel comic from that there was in the trade era because I wanted to read it for the first time, and there were not robust digital options at that point. And now I look at that collection, I'm like, a lot of that stuff I'm never going to read again. Reading it once was enough. And that's how I experienced Marvel Now originally. That's how I experienced the Heroic Age in 2010 originally. And I look back, and had I had the choice to experience it first digitally the way that we do now, and we're so lucky to do, I could have saved a lot of money and space and backbreaking labor to move those books all around the world. And so now I really have this litmus test of like, do I think I'm going to re-experience that book and repeatedly, because that's the only reason I need a physical copy. So like looking at the top 5 of this year, right? Some of those books, I don't know if I'm going to reread them over again. I've been really thinking about Solomon Kane. I love that book. Patrick Zurcher's art is so amazing. I can't wait to talk about it later. And so I was like, ooh, should I pre-order the trade collection? I don't know that I would ever reread it. Or maybe once just to kind of like absorb the story again now that I know the ending and go back to the beginning. But will I reread it a second time, a third time? I just don't know. I don't know. Whereas Out of Alcatraz, I could see me rereading that over and over again. So I'm going to get more things from it. It's going to make me think. The art is so lovely. I think I would appreciate it in a physical edition. So I do think I'm probably going to probably order a copy of Out of Alcatraz. So what I kind of pose to all of you who are thinking about, who have a physical collection, is a physical collection to what end? Because I can tell you, I went overboard. I did not need all of the books that I have in this house, but I am very happy with all the books that are on the shelf, because for me, they're reference books, and I do crack them open all the time because I have a website where I have guides to all of these comics, tens of thousands of comics. So I do have a reason to crack open a book from the 1960s for continuity purposes, for reference purposes, for explaining what happened in the issue purposes. But for books that just came out a day ago, I don't know if I need a physical copy. So I'm not trying to harsh your vibe if you love collecting, or if you love getting things physical, or if you're a floppy reader rather than digital reader. I'm just saying, things, physical things, they're not ephemeral. They last. You traded money for them, and now you've got to be their shepherd. And it's fine when you've only got 100 comics or 200 comics, but comics as a hobby just keeps going and going and going and going, especially if you're watching this show and you know that you like new comics, and there's no turn off to that spigot until you just say, I've had enough of comics. And I don't want you to feel like you had enough of comics just because your house gets full. It's fine if you had enough of comics because you're like, you know what, I'm good. I don't need to read new stories anymore. You know what, I found all my favorites. Those are great reasons. But it's a sad thing to get sick of comics because you're like, I just don't want to fit them in my house anymore. So I want you to make good decisions about that. So for me, I only buy physical copies of things that I'm going to reference or reread, and I have my own reasons for that, and I encourage you to find your reasons too, because I think you will love your collection more if you do. So that is my moment of crisis. Always impromptu, never especially planned, as you could certainly tell from that one. So let's see what comments you had, and then we'll get into the books of this week. So let me just scroll up a little bit to see. Okay. Some people talking about the omnibus announcements, but I'm going to get to that in your mint condition tomorrow. So like Richard Bradley talking about the mapping of the Fall of the House of X, Rise of the Powers of X omnibus, extremely disappointing. They had the answer in their hands and they just ignored it. And then Messiah trilogy I'll be talking about tomorrow on your mint condition. And Georgie Chimchimov saying, I'm not selling out, it's for the fans. Well, I have a complicated relationship with advertising because I work in advertising and marketing, and I've always worked in communications, or at least analytics about communications. And so many ads are so ineffective. Like, it's good click-through. If we were at an ad campaign for any business, anybody you know that has a business, if we were at an ad campaign for them and they got 1% click-through, like 1 out of every 100 people who saw the ad clicked the ad, they'd be having an ice cream cake. They would be so excited about that. So to think about that, you've got to spray and pray. And what spray and pray used to mean in an I'm sorry, I'm this kind of nerd. What spray and pray used to mean in an advertising sense was like physical. Put so many things out there. Put flyers in every Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper that was coming out that day. Send mailers to everybody in a whole zip code, right? You would just spray the stuff out and pray that somebody would respond. And that was incredibly low. So much lower than 1%, because you were hitting people that had no interest in your toothpaste, your realty company, your house cleaning service, your pet food. You had no idea, right? Now in the world of targeted ads and internet, we all talk about it like it's an invasion of privacy, but it's actually kind of a nice thing in a way to see advertisements that are a little bit more geared to who you are and what you might be interested in. I don't need to see any cat food advertisements. I don't own a cat. But what that leads to is it's still spray and pray because the good click-through ratio is 1%. So like, I don't want to put 100 ads on my site so that you see 100 of them and one of them is relevant to you, right? That just seems like a losing proposition. And then I get, $2, right? I mean, depending on what the thing is, if you're just cat food, you're probably only paying $1 or $2 per click, because that's how ads online work, cost per click. But then if it's something, if you happen to see an ad that got placed on my site for like, I don't know, some like cancer treatment at a hospital near you and you click it, that could be like a $200 or $300 cost per click, because they're looking for people to be their patients and they get a much more, high income boost if somebody actually transacts with their business. Or what if it's like a car dealership, right? Car dealerships pay like dozens or hundreds of dollars on a cost per click. So like, but is it worth it to me to get that $200 to $200 for your click, to have shown you those 100 ads to get to one that you might click. And I think about that all the time as an audience member when I get served ads on any website, on any YouTube video. I think, would I rather just give them $2? And that's why I pledge to Patreons. That's why I pay for websites like Sketched. It's why I chip in for stuff, not only to support the creators, but when they give me a fair price to be like, hey, I will not advertise to you in exchange for $3 a month. I'm like, I'm not made of money, but for $3 a month, my eyeballs and their privacy are worth $3 a month. And if that's how much you think you could get for clicks from me, I would rather just give you the $3. I would always rather that on every website on the internet. I've always said that about things like Facebook and Instagram, social media sites. I'm like, you tell me how much money you think you're going to make off of advertising to me. I will give you that money rather than being advertised to. Clearly, that could have been a second moment of crisis. Perhaps we will do it a little bit more deeply in the future. Okay. Cruel Angel's saying, after I start talking about setting limits, I decided not to go for Krakoa. I know most of it's supposed to be good, but it would be a blind buy for me and a major commitment of time and money. Yeah, I agree. It's 600 issues. 600. And if you're going to go in for all of that, how many times are you going to reread all those 600 issues, having never even read them before? For the price of one of those omnibuses, go on Marvel Unlimited and just do a random sampling of 60 of them and see what you think about it. William Lee is just joining us. Georgie Chimchimov sounds like it's sticking on to like the creator side of the Krakoa books, only getting the stuff you're interested in. And no Krakoa at all, but you could just get like the Duggan omnibus or the Ewing omnibus rather than going it for these all-in books. Gonzo with a fantastic comment. The real moment of crisis is the internet. Superjob saying, sometimes like a Grant Morrison book where I usually only understand 10% of it on the first read. Yeah, Grant Morrison, even though I don't always like their work, is a great person to have physically because you just get so much more from their writing every time. And some writing is built like that, right? Some writing has so many hints and things, and you get to the end and you're like, oh, that's why all of those hints and themes matters. Then it's fun to go back to the beginning, or like a big reveal at the end, or like something comes together at the end. And that's how I absolutely feel about Grant Morrison's Batman. Like, I'm now almost done, I think, my third time through it, and I keep meaning to finish it because it's been a couple of years that I've just let it sit. And yeah, I'm getting more because I already know the ending, and sometimes that's a good thing, right? So let's see. Yeah, Ryan Wilson saying, I get a lot out of Morrison stuff. Cool Angel agreeing with my favorite of Ghost Protocol. No Varg and his Grace and L is here. I love Ghost Protocol. Most fun to rewatch. Yeah, I like many Mission Impossible series, but I could watch Ghost Protocol once a week for a year. I would never get bored. Never get bored. Everybody likes Ghost Protocol. Okay. Jamie C47 might be going on the creator omnis, as I just said, for Krakoa. James Bolton. I don't know if we ever said hi to James Bolton before. I've read Superior Spidey and Batman by Snyder Capullo at least 6 times now over the years. That's a great value proposition for an omnibus, right? A book that you're going to touch a lot. I mean, these things are $100. Are you paying $100 just to see the spine on your shelf? Me, sometimes. But I would rather pay $100 because if you read it 6 times and you paid $100, just let's pretend everybody pays full cover price in this conversation. You have now made it so that like each of your reads was only $17, and then you read it again and again, and you're up to 8, and now each of your reads are only $12.50, and eventually it was just practically free because you've read it so many times. Richard Bradley saying, the big appeal of the Age of Krakoa volumes to me is I read the Dawn, Rain, and Trials trade paperbacks, and I want to read Destiny and Fall the same way, and we'll see it. Now, the thing is, those trade paperbacks are not even in the perfect order. Really, they're in kind of like modified release order. They're kind of in release order, but then if there were 2 issues that really read well together or back to back, they got like pushed in, even if in release order maybe one of them was like a little bit later. But it's not like they're not totally in reading order, so the omnibuses could be like one of 3 things. They could be totally in perfected reading order, which Jordan D. White has in a PDF and has said that he has. They could just be in the Dawn, Rain, Trials trades order, which is like decent, but it's actually almost more annoying because it's like kind of in order, but it's not really in order. Or they could just be kind of ganged up by story arcs the way that it would be in an event omnibus, and that would be a disaster. Sasmer saying, for me, a reread or rewatch is equal parts of nostalgia and an expectation that I'll pick up something new this time around. And I love something where I can pick up new things even like the 10th or 20th or 30th time. I sometimes still include, even though I truly have every frame of it committed to memory, I've easily seen it over 100 times, I still will sometimes find find like a little thing happening in the background because there's so many amazing comedians all moving around at once. Patrick Borchild saying, I've read X Factor Investigations by David so much. So original. The plot expands until the last issues. Love that series. Have it in trade paperback. I'm now in the best format. Marvel Omnibus. I love discovering new things in the art of writing when rereading. Cedric and Ellen saying, I wish I could find the time to reread my collection. So I've been working on my list, Ellen, of the runs I want to read. Some of them are reread. Things I haven't read recently enough that I want to reread them, but a lot of things are just things I've never read comprehensively all at once. Like, I've read a lot of the first 100 issues of Amazing Spider-Man that is in the Epic Collections, the Stan Lee era. Have I read all of them sequentially? No. I've read like issue 32 and issue 64 and things that are also not square numbers. And I've never read the whole thing, so that's on the list. And so I've been tallying up how many issues each of the runs are to kind of get an idea. I'm almost to 600 things that I really want to read. And they, of course, they're ranked and there's an algorithm. It's 25,000 issues. Now, granted, that's most of the issues that are in the house, so I would get good use. It's all of these. Every one of these things is on the list. But also, it's like, well, I also read 50, 60 new issues a week, so how long is it going to take to read 25,000 issues? James Bolton is saying, I randomly subbed to Absolute Wonder Woman when it was announced. It's only my only single issue I get, and that made me buy Wonder Woman by Rucka Omni, and now that's going to be a reread a few times in my life, so that's good. Yeah, and you know, I look back, because at the time, before a lot of these omnibuses were announced, it was a wild world of comic collecting back in like 2010, 2012, and it was kind of like, you didn't realize that there was going to be a way to read these things other than the physical thing. There were like pirate scans out there, but some of them were bad scans. And so like, yeah, I bought every Wonder Woman issue being like, I'm going to sit down and read these all in a row. Has that happened yet? No. I've read 50 issues of Perez, which now is an omnibus, and I might finally break down and buy them, but I haven't reread them. And all the other issues of Wonder Woman I have, which I think in total it was like 275, haven't read them yet. So it's a different world. It's a different world. It's a different world now. And we don't always have to subscribe to things physically to get to that place. Logan Wayne saying the only reason I don't reread is because I'm a very slow reader and I have so much I haven't read yet. Mall360 saying, the Moment of Krisis speaks truth. I have a fear of running out of space for my collected editions and weekly physical pulls. Definitely makes me think every week. Yeah, I mean, things are getting double stacked now. I mean, when I first got here, I just had this bookshelf, and then I added this bookshelf. Now there's another bookshelf over there. We're running out of physical space to put bookshelves. Good evening to Rami Darwish. Adrian Montana's just finished out of Alcatraz. I don't want to know about the last issue. Don't spoil me. A much better read after taking some time away from it. I probably wasn't in the headspace for it. Looking forward to the hardcover. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to buy the hardcover. Wow, so many people, so many interesting things to say about this, but we are at the 30-minute mark. I'm just going to see if there's anybody that has not gotten a time to chime in on it yet. Novark saying, I'm at the edge of needing to stop collecting comics. Not that I'm sick of them, never, because the comics are my life, but purely because I'm running out of space. Yeah, and you know, I really thought I was almost out because I had the Epic collections. I don't buy the modern ones, and it's like there's not like a whole lot more Epic collections still to come of the classic lines. Maybe like another like 4 or 5 of these bricks of shells, but we're really close, honestly. And then DC, those MRFers at DC put out these finest and sucked me back in. Okay, let's see if there's anybody else. Yarne Paul saying, how do people explain the interconnectivity of the beginning of Krakoa, that there are books that would be perfectly mapped? It's just something exciting as a concept to own. I agree. If Marvel Unlimited just has a folder with the perfect reading order, I think on the app it does have reading orders, because I've seen people be like, I just follow the reading order, but I just use web for everything because I'm old and I don't have a phone. I do, but I don't know how to use it. So, for me, I would use Crushing Crisis for that, and I'm not rereading it all, so I'm not putting it in order, so you will not find a complete reading order to that. On Crushing Crisis, Hank saying it's a reference and art inspiration, mostly making it worth having. I keep my library at my studio, and I only bring home what I read or study. That's a wonderful way to do it. Biffman Powell saying Attack on Titan is something that hits even harder on revisiting. And I think, gosh, you just have so many interesting things to say. But I think we've got to move on to the comic books. So this was a relatively sizable week. I think we almost cracked 50 issues of reading, which I did over a frantic 48-hour period. And I'm hoping that I'm also going to get to do another one this week, because I am trying to catch up. But this week is pretty bonkers. In addition to being on near mint condition for that stream tomorrow about omnibuses, we might do Marvel Slitzes this week. They've been kind of arriving a little bit slowly lately, and I am kind of part of the regular crew, and I get to hang out with my friends and talk trash on all the Marvel comic books, or good things. And, you know, I'm one of the few people out there who reads every one of them, so I do feel honor bound to appear on that show and give my opinion. Okay, let's begin, shall we? And as we always know, I will take a real break somewhere in the middle of this, probably usually after the letter I. But if you're talking about the comics that I'm currently on, I will try to bring up your comments, especially if you give a little capsule review. I love to get voices other than my own, just because I feel like something about a book does not mean you have to feel that way about a book. So please do chime in, but if we're more than one book past where that discussion happened, I tend to save it for the break. And there's a ton of you on today, so I really look forward to all of your opinions and chat as we go. So, as we know, I don't read 2000 AD anymore. I just appreciate its very cool covers. I love this weird faceless skeleton guy. Very, very cool. So my first read of the week was Absolute Superman, written by Jason Aaron, art from Rafa Sandoval, and also Fico Ossio, colors from Ulysses Ariola, and letters from Becca Carey. So I love, and I've said this a lot, that the unifying aspect of this book is the colors, because even when we've switched artists once already for a whole arc, Ulysses Ariola kept it really unified, and I love his colors on Rafa Sandoval. As we know, this is the colors show, because I have a lot of opinions about these things. So these pages looked spectacular. And it was great because we got Superman in action, which we really haven't had too much so far in this series. And we really got to experience his youth. Like, he's a pretty young guy here, and it shows on his face, and it shows in his decisions. And we really see him at risk in this issue. Like, he gets shot with a kryptonite bullet. He's being fought by these big tanks who can hurt him. He's not a completely impervious Superman. But then we switch to Fico Ossio's art. Now, I like Fico Ossio, but if you look at this Superman's face, there's this maxim that the more lines you put in a face, the older a character looks. But if you're an artist who just renders a lot and uses a lot of lines, your characters will just look older. But also look at the shape of his face. This looks like a 40-something-year-old Superman compared to Rafa Sandoval's Superman, who I know he's cast in this red light art here, but he's so young. His face is so unlined, and you can see it in the shape of his face, and the shape of his jawline. Even here where he's bruised and battered and he's got more lines in his face, he still looks like a young guy. So this really took me out of it, and I'm sorry, if you want to be one of my top 10 comics of the year, you have to render your characters in a consistent way, and this took me out of it, even though this art was great, and these colors were still great. Story-wise, I'm really interested and I'm engaged in this world. I love the delicate balance of these different factions who are recast not as their normal selves. So Ra's al Ghul and his Lazarus Corporation, that's different than the League of Shadows, right? Jimmy Olsen is part of the Omega Men. That's crazy talk. So I am really enjoying this. I think it is doing the reinvention thing well, which is going to be a topic we're going to hit several times today. But I just can't say that it's a top performing comic on the market. Even looking at Absolute Wonder Woman when Mattia Dialoulis took over for those two issues, one of my favorite artists, so that's an easy win for me. But in terms of Diana, even though he draws so differently than Hayden Sherman, couldn't be more different, Diana still looked like that Diana to me. So I thought that that's really important. Georgie Chimchima was saying Absolute Super number 5, still one of my, or I don't know why we said 5. This is like 8, I don't know, what number? 9. It's still one of my favorite books, was my favorite Absolute until Absolute Martian Manhunter issue 4. Can't wait to see more of Ra's 2. Okay, let's continue to the next book, which is Superman in Action Comics. Now, Action Comics right now is being written by Mark Waid with an artist I really enjoy, Skylar Partridge, who I loved on that Reversal OGN by Alex DeCampi that we read earlier this year, colors by Ivan Placentia, letters from Steve Wan. So what this is Mark Waid is taking this whole Action Comics arc as a complete flashback to canonizing the idea of Clark Kent as the canonical Superboy, which used to be canonical, which is really one of the defining traits of going from the Golden Age to the Silver Age. In the Golden Age, Superboy was just a story. Then in Silver Age, he literally had been Superboy. Of course, that's eliminated by John Byrne's origin of Superman in 1986 after Crisis and Man of Steel, because there's no room for Superboy anymore, and DC is kind of going back and forth. And so Mark Waid here is having a present-day Superman at an indeterminate time narrate his early times as Superboy. I loved this page. This, to me, is what I like about Skylar Partridge's art. Just really good faces, really clear. You don't have to do a lot in coloring to define her work. I believe uses she, her. Could be wrong. That really works for me. When the coloring starts getting too heavy-handed, then I start to like it less. And I feel like last issue, that was my dispute. I love this page because what Waid is doing is he's saying after Superboy hits the scene and we know who he is, there's room for all those other adventures. Basically, Waid is so clever about this, and he's working within the hyper time of the DC's universe to be like, hey, anything you want to say was in continuity from the old Superboy story that you liked probably could also fit in here. And there's just also this great beat of like, Superboy is not completely impervious yet. Superboy can't fly as fast yet. He says heat vision was a little ways off. I was still struggling with freeze breath and my skin wasn't yet as tough as it would get. And this is just another great page of Skylar Partridge. I think we always have to give time for a new creative team to kind of gel. And I just don't think Placentia's colors really sat right on Partridge's art. You just don't have to work that hard on Partridge's art. I think it's lovely just as it is. Now, this does kind of lean into like Archie Comics territory. It gets very like, here we are in high school, which I don't object to, because Wade wrote some great Archie comics. So we get Superman or Superboy in high school kind of trying to deal with being Superboy and deal with being in high school. And you know what? I'll read a year of that. I have no problem reading a year of that. I think it's actually quite delightful. James Abel saying, I'm not feeling the Superboy arc. If I wanted a Superboy story, I would go back and watch Smallville. The writing and the art was good, but story-wise, it's not for me. I don't know that I'm like hooked on the story, but I'm open to being hooked on the story. Lance McNair says, I love the whimsy of Clark being Superboy and being a Legion of Superheroes reserve member, even though him being known as Superboy to the world kind of undercuts the idea of Superman. And something that happens here is Lois Lane roundaboutly, even though she's a teenager at this point too, does get to name him, which is a nod to the fact that she names him as an adult, and Mark Waid doesn't want to lose that through line, even though I don't think historically in the Silver Age it would have still been Lois who decided to call him Superboy. Next we come to Aquaman, and I know that I am disputing the main public opinion about this. It's this run by Jeremy Adams. We have a fill-in artist, or at least the alternating artist here, Michael Shelfer, because it was originated by Bruce Timm. Colors from Rex Locus, letters by Dave Sharp. I love this art. There's something about it I just love. It reminds me of like a comic book from like 2002. It's not trying to be super realistic. It's got a little bit of a cartoony edge to it. The characters have a little bit of a squareness to them. I just love it. And I love it for Aquaman. I don't need Aquaman to always be super hip, perfectly rendered the way we had it when Steps and Sedgwick was drawing him. This really works for me. And I think Rex Locus's colors sit on this perfectly. And it's not that different from the way that Tim was drawing it, because they still have the very square nose and kind of long lined faces. But I just did not like the way his art looked or his colors. It was just so busy I couldn't get into it. Now, story-wise, I was really vibing with this. Like, he's amassed basically this group of like undersea legends. He's got Nemo, he's got Arion, he's got the Wonder Twin who does water stuff. They're all under the and this book had a recap page, which DC books very rarely do. I love that for me. But then they find the sunken version of Atlantis, and that's not Mera, because in this Atlantis everybody's old. Everybody's like 40 years older than they were when he last met them. You know, you could have gotten away with that if it was just Mera who was old, because we maybe could have been like, oh no, they're going to kill Mera. But to have Garth, to have Jackson, to you know, Tempest and Aqualad, to have them all be this old, we know that's not going to stick. We know it's a fake story beat. So it kind of just took me out. I was vibing. I was like totally vibing. I'm like, I'm in the sea doing flips and shit. I love this so much. And then I got to this page, which is drawn very, very well. And it was like, and I totally lost the vibe, because I'm like, I don't believe this story anymore. You're wasting my time. Okay. Let's move on. I did not read Kevin Smith Presents Archie Meets Jay and Silent Bob, because I cannot imagine a universe where I would find that interesting, but I am happy that it exists. I don't read Assassin's Apprentice 3, number 6, from Dark Horse Comics. I did, however, read my digital Marvel comics of the week, and we always try to get through all of them very, very quickly in 60 seconds. Let's see what we can do. So this is Astonishing Avengers by Steve Orlando, art by Andres Genola. Like, wow, that's a big get for one of these digital books. Colors from Carlos Lopez, letters from Travis Lanham. Love a use of Moondragon. I love that they're still kind of fixated on this red monolith that they're all investigating, but we're using that to spin off other stuff. I mean, this is a gorgeous page. This is an absolutely gorgeous page. And I like that we're still coloring it in a way that's like a little bit more saturated and webcomic-y, but like this one worked for me. This is exactly what I want from the digital comic. Use a bunch of Avengers characters we have no room for in the main Avengers book, show their side adventures, show all their connections to each other. Astonishing Spider-Man, this book, every time I think this book is as bad as a book could possibly get, it gets worse. It's written by Scott Aukerman, art by Salva L. Espin, who's a real artist, colors from Ceci De La Cruz, who we've established I don't like the colors, and letters from Joe Sabino. Here, Ackerman has Spider-Man getting all these cosmic powers. We've seen that before, so his consciousness is expanding. He's like, I see eternity. I see the multiverse. I'm all Spider-Man at once. And then at the end, we get an author insert where he falls into Aquaman's room, and Aquaman's like, we've got to have a talk. You're not Grant Morrison. You're writing a digital comic book. Rein it in, pal. You haven't written a single good issue, and there's been 34 of them. I don't think you get to play the self-insert game. Just focus on the quips and the thwips, buddy. Don't get too far in front of your skis. And I guess we'll restart it and give me a full minute to talk about X-Men. Actually, I don't need a minute. That's ridiculous. Oh, by the way, here's a cool moment of him like, what's this? Somehow I can see between multiverses. And of course, to bait the readers, it's every single picture of him making out and groping Mary Jane, because we know how Spider-Man readers are. Yeah, this book is truly dreadful. And then Astonishing X-Men Digital, which is by Alex Packnadal with art from Philip Sevi, who I really think is like kind of figured something out, even though he's been doing this for a year now, that just looks better on these recent issues. Colored by Michael Bartolo and lettered by Clayton Cowles. Again, I've said, like, once you read one, we're trapped on an island with a murderous cult story, you've kind of read them all. But this is drawn really well, and it's using husk and skin really well. And again, that's all I want from these digital comics. I am not asking for them to be the Mona Lisa of X-Men. I'm not asking for them to be the best X-Men, new X-Men by Grant Morrison. I'm asking them to take a character who probably cannot support a physical ongoing and to tell an interesting story with them. And that's enough for me. Yeah, that is totally, totally enough for me. So now we come to a book that I'm going to give myself a whole minute for. You all know I love Avengers Academy, Marvel's Voices Infinity comic. It was in my top 60 of the year. It's written by Anthony Oliveira, who is brilliant. Drawn here by one of the regular rotating artists, Pablo Collar. Colors from KJ Diaz. Letters from Joe Caramagna. This cover is terrible. The reason the cover is terrible is because this issue, Pablo Collar, and it's issue 50, big celebration, it's all true vertical scroll. I could not zoom out enough to capture enough of the vertical scroll to show you. I mean, here we're at this clock tower at the top of the Avengers campus, and we're going all through it. We're seeing every character. Then there's insets to take us closer to the characters, but we're still going down. We're seeing characters on the outside. Every page was this. This is just a tiny slice of a chase of Stilt Boy through the city that the art was probably this much art. If you read one issue and you just want to see who these characters are and get the whimsy, this again was a page that probably scrolled like at least 4 feet in actual physical world. That's all of them just climbing up the stilts or climbing down the stilts of Stiltman. And that's actually a really cool rhetorical thing, because Stiltman's at the top. So how do you tell a story that's scrolling down his stilts, but still tell the story so it's moving forward in time? This was the most, I love this book, and this is the most fun I've had reading this book in a while, because it had the full cast. I think, at the point that you've done 50 issues and they come out weekly, of course you can't use the full cast in every issue because it just gets old. So Oliveira has had to break them up a little bit for the past 10 or 12 weeks, but they're all back together in this book, and I do really love it. And Quincanito saying Avengers Academy is the best Marvel comic coming out, and it's not even close. It's definitely in my top 10 Marvel comic books coming out right now. It might even be in my top 5 if we went through and counted. And it's probably the one I love the most. Like, in terms of a Marvel book that I have the most unbidden affection for. And so the joke is, I pay a monthly fee of whatever it is, $7 or $8 for Marvel Unlimited to read this comic book, which makes sense because it comes out weekly. So there's 4 of them a month, and they're about normal comic length. And then I get, the whole Marvel 30,000 comic book collection digitally, along with my subscription to Avengers Academy. So now we come to Batman and Robin. This is Batman and Robin 23 by Philip Kennedy Johnson, art from Miguel Mendonca, colors from Marcelo Mayo, and letters from Steve Wands. This arc has been going on since issue 14. We're on the 10th issue, and I don't care anymore. I just don't care anymore. It's about Memento, who's a serial killer, and he's been around for 100 years, and then we find out that it's because he's a demon and he rhymes just like a Trigan, and so Batman has a flashback where a Trigan takes him back in time so that he can see the birth of this demon and how he haunted the person that he's haunted, but also Damien is stuck underground with all of these other kids, and the demon's trying to inhabit him, but then Batman is really sad, and so the Batman goes, it's just these are all good plot elements, but when we're in the 10th issue of your ongoing story arc, and we're not talking Claremontian stuff here where other things are happening and 10 issues have gone by. No, this is the one thing that has been happening for 10 issues. It's not that interesting, and Philip Kennedy Johnson is not that good of a writer. Also, I we've established, I despise how he writes Damian, so half of the book, billed as Robin and Batman, or Batman and Robin, is completely lost on me. And then I just have to talk about this page, because I typically really like Miguel Mendonca. And at a glance, this is a cool page, right? It's kinetic, it's a big splash page, Batman is jumping down. Here's what I hate about it. What are these two slashes of additional panels here? The one is him seeing this demon, and the other one is crashing into the demon. Talk to me about the visual storytelling here, because it doesn't make any sense. Why are they laid out like that? Why are they not just two square panels at the bottom? Are we trying to intimate eyes? Because they don't really look quite like eyes. They're not really symmetrical, and they're like way too vertical. Are we trying to intimate bat wings? If that's the case, they're too low, and they should be his cape, and what's at the center of the bat wings to give us bat wings? If anything, the thing that actually would have worked was to have them be the reverse of his cape. If his cape was like in front of him, but also drooping down behind him, then the reverse of the cape could have been the extra panels. That would have been so cool. That would have been very J.H. Williams. Instead, we get basically what is a very poorly planned splash page that just has two panels that don't communicate anything about the motion, the camera switch places, you know, there's nothing about it that makes sense. And they just did it to put more crap on the page. And so that kind of really bothers me. Like, and that's not Philip Kennedy Johnson's. He might have said put two inset panels. Who knows? But Miguel Mendonca biffed it here, because I do think that it just didn't work. Now, Brendan Riley says Philip Kennedy Johnson is one of my favorite writers, and I've loved how he's written the relationship between Damon and Bruce. I've never been more interested in Damon. So everybody's got a different vibe. I will say I am predisposed generally to dislike Philip Kennedy Johnson, but I actually usually like when he does family stuff, because I liked what he did on Action Comics. I don't like when he does random abused teenager is taken in by a random adult with PTSD. I think it's over already. But I'm open to him writing well. I just don't feel like this Damian is the Damian I've ever met before. It doesn't track. But for you, who's never been interested in Damian before, maybe he's giving you a version that's interesting. So I think that's an important thing to keep in our minds, that like sometimes when I'm like, this is not the Block character, that's because I've literally read every one of their appearances for the past 15 years. Sometimes it's a good thing to have them be like a little bit different. Yeah. As I just said, Kenneth Greeley, I do like his Superman. I do think he's an absolute garbage writer, and the only thing he knows how to write is sexual trauma. It's in every single one of his books. Go to therapy, dude. I don't need to keep reading about it. Okay, that's not you. That's Philip Kennedy Johnson. Let's continue to Batman Dark Patterns, which is now officially my favorite comic book of 2025, which is kind of wild, because this was not like the tippity-top bestity best issue of Batman Dark Patterns, but it was still extremely, extremely good. And again, I really value consistency. And so this has the consistency of the same artist, Hayden Sherman. They're so amazing. Colored always by Trona Farrell on every single issue. And so it just always is of a piece. But I love, even within that consistency, how different Hayden Sherman's characters can look, and even how different his Batman is. Like, he can draw a very kind of sinister shadowed Batman, and then a Batman that looks kind of very like square and almost like he's right out of the 60s in the same book, and it still feels consistent because there's a through line. Now, I will say I usually love Hayden Sherman's paneling. I love it here as we get this pages that's divided up into like triangles that kind of rotate around as we see Batman's action from the top to the ground and then moving to the right. Really, really clever, easy to follow. You know exactly what's going on. This page I was a little puzzled by, because that first panel in that shape, that rounded shape, he doesn't usually use rounded shapes, or they don't usually use rounded shapes. And it's, and it looks like a rear view mirror or something, but then Batman's in here and there's no other shape in here that reflects that. And then we have a rounded shape at the bottom as well. Even his computer screen is a very, very square screen. And I find that if you really dig into Hayden Sherman's paneling throughout this book, the paneling usually reflects the architecture of the scene, and you can kind of find hints in the scene. Like, this is a great organic paneling, this very kind of Hitchcockian side view of this guy. And we see a flashback to the, you know, this body that he's buried, and it swirls as we kind of move throughout the shadow of his body, and then we come down to this brilliant, brilliant version at the bottom. That to me is very organic and is very based on what's happening on the page. And this one page, and the reason I picked it out is not because I'm criticizing this book. This is like the one time I've seen Hayden Sherman do a page in this whole series, or an Absolute Wonder where I'm like, I just don't get the choice. And that's amazing in and of itself. And the art on the page is still absolutely excellent. I mean, even just this decision to have Batman at the bottom with his like underbite and the way he's gritting his perfect Batman teeth together, just like so good. I love this arc and this idea that Gotham is alive. It's not living in the way that the second arc had a tower that was alive. It's living that it has a constant history, constant secrets. It's got things underground growing like roots, and Batman has to dig them out. And it's a book that really puts Batman at risk. And I absolutely love when Batman is at risk. Lance McNair is so hype for Batman Dark Patterns after how I've been gushing about. Not just me, everybody in the whole world gushes about it. Cruel Angel saying, what happens when two different people become possessive about their territory? Hardcore detective work and brilliant sniper trap. Yeah, the sniper sequence was so cool. James Abel saying, this was good but not great. I would say it's great but not excellent, but we're in a similar zone. Something was missing and almost felt like Dan wasn't sure how to write the issues with Red Hood. And I saw somebody else, Kenneth Gurley, saying Dark Patterns is a very underrated Bat title, one of my favorites for 2025 so far. I don't know if it's underrated at this point. I feel like everywhere I go, everybody's talking about it. William Lee saying it's giving me Tim Sale, yes. And Quinn Canito saying it whips hard. I mean, it's so pleasing when everybody's reading and agreeing that the best book is the best book. Like, so often I'm on the outside looking in because I just have a very different taste, as we've established, than a lot of people. So sometimes people are talking about the best book and I'm like, but that book is terrible. Why are we talking about it like it's good? Which is how I feel about most books by Dennis Camp this year. But this book, I do feel that way about, and it's just satisfying when all of the cherries align on the slot machine and it's like, book that everybody likes is also really good and it's a really popular character. That's really fun for me. And even Johnny chiming in, Batman Dark Patterns is so goddamn good. Go check out Johnny's podcast, Biff Bam Pow, a comic book podcast. Okay, prepare for me to go off at length. I'll set the clock, but I won't. I'm not going to be obeying the clock. So there's this Elseworlds book, Batman Gotham by Gaslight, A League for Justice. And he's apparently assembled a Justice League. And I wrote about this on Crushing Crisis as I was writing my preview of the books of the week. And I was like, how do they even justify having this whole like Victorian era Justice League? How do they even get them all together? So then I was like, oh, there was a series last year of Batman by Batman by Gaslight, the Kryptonian Age. I'll go back and read the first issue of that to just understand. Then I just got completely enveloped for a whole hour this weekend. Y'all, this is Absolute Batman. Absolute Batman itself, it's fine. It's like a low C- for me in the scale of A to F. This book is an A+. Andy Diggle is a voice we do not hear enough from. Leandro Fernandez is drawing amazing stuff. It's colored by Dave Stewart, who is like a veteran. And I loved that, like, it's not even a Batman book. It starts out in Gotham, and we're focused on this idea of the Kryptonian Age, which are people kind of excavating artifacts that we think is from this lost age of Earth. So it's not even, I thought the Kryptonian Age would just be whenever Superman crashes to the ground. And so Catwoman is trying to steal this ring. But the thing is, it's not all necessarily kryptonite. It's a number of different artifacts that are connected to the history of the DC universe. And Diggle does such a good job of uniting that all. And so then Batman gets involved in, for me, in the issue number 2, and this is last year's series, the Kryptonian Age, truly one of the best choreographed Batman fight scenes I've ever seen. I just couldn't show you the whole thing, but they're on top of a train, and we've seen the on top of a train fight so many times, but it was so good, and I was having that Mission Impossible feeling, and I just kept going back and rereading the pages again and again. But then, not only do we have Batman and Catwoman, so we have Constantine at the service of the Queen of England, and so she's like putting him on to looking for these artifacts as well, and then here's his Batcave, this wonderful Victorian era Batcave. But that's not all. Wonder Woman becomes unearthed as she is too motivated to come up from the underworld, so kind of like shades of Kelly Thompson's Wonder Woman. This started coming out before that, where she comes to the surface world, and she's like, I've got to be in the world of man. Then we have Bruce Wayne trying to track down Catwoman, who is the mistress of a house of ill repute, and there's this great dialogue exchange, him saying, I'm not fond of surprises, and he's in this ridiculous getup, and she says, if I may, for someone who spends his nights leaping over rooftops in an opera mask, you have a woefully underdeveloped sense of play. So the writing is good too. It's not just cameo fest. I love this whole origin of like this underworld that Wonder Woman comes from, and Alan Scott is there, and we still get him getting the ring from a train crash, but it's contextualized very, very differently. Then we have Wonder Woman kind of finding her way into the man's world. And then we have Lois Lane, who is this kind of like, totally onto it newspaper writer, just as she really is. But she's kind of in the Old West at this point, which is where we meet Superman, who is the sheriff of Smallville. But we also meet Lex Luthor, who is like going full Tesla from the Prestige, and he is kind of the person behind the creation of both the Flash and Cyborg here. And then we see Batman and wants to travel there quickly, so he doesn't have a bat plane, he has a bat zeppelin here. I mean, this book it was so great because it recasts all of these characters that we love, but it never feels like a cameo fest. It feels like Andy Diggle sat down and he truly said, how can I remake the entire universe of DC Comics into Victorian age? Only at the 6th issue did it start to feel a little cameo festy, because it was like, here's Harley Quinn, here's Killer Croc, and that was the only point. Then Martian Manhunter's there, but none of the heroes to me felt like it was cameo fest. It only was at the very, very end that it started to feel that way. So now here we are finally onto colors from the current chapter of this book. It's lettered, by the way, by Simon Boland, and it's not always colored by Dave Stewart. Only that first issue was. Ever since then, it's been Matt Hollingsworth. And so this is the issue that came out in this release week, and the whole Justice League is assembled. So the fact that it's called Batman Gotham by Gaslight, A League for Justice, it just says Batman at the front to sell copies. I am addicted to this. I think it's so cool. I love the reason they all come together, and we get like a very real character-driven scene between Alan Scott as Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter coming to blows, and Wonder Woman, Diana, being like, we don't have time for this, and she uses her lasso of truth on them. Meanwhile, we get the whole town kind of fighting, and Superman finally kind of showing his stuff for the first time in front of any other kind of heroes. And there's just this great, Lois Lane is just monologuing. I can see it now. The front page of the Daily Planet. Smallville man stomps sinister sideshow sneak thieves. Oh, who am I kidding? Smallville man's a terrible name. Who does your press? Whoever it is, fire him. The superlative man, the wonder of the Wild West, the pride of the prairie. Nope, I'll scratch that. Wait, I have it. The supernaturalist, reserved, understated, classy. Jimmy, where'd you run off to? I need that camera. I'm babbling here. Just great. It's just a really great series. If you like Absolute and you want to see somebody really reinvent the whole DC universe in a way that's like super consistent, super fun, and is not just a cameo fest, is like really, really grounded in the characters, I am addicted to this book. It immediately hopped into the top 10 of 2024 now that I've caught up on last year's. And by the way, every one of these issues were double length issues, including the new one. So those 6 issues from last year were actually like 12 issues, and this first issue is like 2. Please expect to see it in my top 10 once I get to the front of it. And so now, oh my god, so I've been talking for 25 minutes. Cruel Angel saying, what, Wonder Woman woke up ornery, Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter have a grudge, CK is a Boy Scout, Bats is still a loner, and Luther is a mecha. I'm intrigued, and I love Old West Harley. Kane looks like such a fun read. I truly think it is. Brendan Riley saying, the Gotham by Gaslight series has been so much better than it has any right to be. Perfect way to say it. Very pleasant surprise. Love the world building. Van Powell loves the original Mignola Gotham by Gaslight, which now I have to go back and read, but I haven't read any of this new recent sequel stuff. Big fan of Diggle. I love Andy Diggle, and I love Leandro Fernandez as an Old Guard with Rucka. So yeah, and I think this is even a little bit more refined than the way he drew on Old Guard, which was very succinct and perfect for Old Guard. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of this. If any of this Victorian stuff, reimagining the origins of the DC universe and really connecting them all thoroughly sounds appealing to you, you will dig this book. I really, really think you will dig. Okay. Wow. So there was my 29 minutes on that, right? Let me just, a little bit of extra. Okay. All right. Let us continue to whatever. Oh, and then there is some Batman in the book. Some Batman. Okay. Now we have Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, second series called The Rite of Spring. And this was the indie book. It was my number 2 pick for what would be my pick of the week. And it was my number 2 pick after I read all my picks for my pick of the week. It just wasn't quite my number 1, but it is still like a 5 out of 5. If you have not read the first series of this Patrick Horvath book, which is lettered by Hassan Otsman Alhoun, Horvath does everything else, run to read the original series from last year. It is like the Berenstein Bears meets Dexter. It's about this serial killer bear. You find that out early. I'm not spoiling out anything. And about her just murdering it up. And she lives in this small town. She is so friendly and so nice. And finally the walls start to close in as her murders get a little too close to home. And we open up on a scene that is ripped from the first one of her vivisecting this duck that was one of the people that she killed in the first book. And it's just so gruesome. And it's the first page. And it just immediately sucked me back in. And so then this book doesn't focus on her at all. It focuses on the sister of that character who has spent the last 8 years trying to find her missing brother, convinced that there must be some news about him somewhere, even if he's dead. And you would think that that's boring because like we want to spend time with the main character, the murder bear. But no, it's like, it's just such a fully realized version of this woman whose life has totally fallen apart because she cannot accept that her brother is gone. So she just works a crummy job at a copy shop so she can make copies of these flyers in like 1994, by the way, to spread around to be like, have you ever seen my brother? And finally finally in this issue, she gets a hit on her search. It's just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. This had a plot twist I did not see coming. I'm very interested to see where it is going next. Bithman Powell, Patrick Horvath had one of the most impressive comic book debuts with the original Beneath the Trees. It's crazy to believe that it is his debut. Hank saying the first series has been one of my favorite reads this year. James Abel pointing out you can read Beneath the Trees 2 on Hoopla and Global Comics. It's so cool. I mean, it's a serial killer story with anthropomorphized animals, and it is so well planned. Next, we come to Blood Squad 7, and I find new ways to hate this book every month, yet I am still here. It is written by Joe Casey, art by Paul Fry, colors by Francesco Segala, with flats by Agnes Posa, and letters from Russ Wooten. And you have to know about this book that it is Joe Casey trying to replace Youngblood in the history of the Image unified universe with a team that Image can kind of retain control of, not realizing that Rob Liefeld was going to get the rights back to Youngblood. This book, it looked really good, but I have two problems with it. The ongoing problem with it is that we barely get time to know the characters and there's no action. So how are we on issue 9 when there's no action and we don't know the characters? The scenes are so oblique. They're always talking about like how the press is going to receive their characters and like, let's get them a new jacket. But somehow after 9 issues and supposedly like trying to do something better than Youngblood, this is worlds and worlds worse than Youngblood. There's nothing cool about these characters. We don't know who they are and they don't do anything. How can you say that's an improvement on Youngblood? But then the other thing it does is it centers their whole mission on basically the events of October 7th in Israel that would have been 2023 that kind of started this new round of genocide against Palestinians. And I get doing a rip from the headlines plot, but Joe Casey in this very distasteful way is like, but there were supervillains involved too. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I get there's a history of that in comic books. Like there, we were writing stories about punching Hitler in the face during World War II and we were inserting the Red Skull into that. Like I get that there's a history of putting supervillains into present day conflicts, even genocides. But something about this in a book that just has no identity and no iconic characters, there is no Captain America here, to then be like, we're doing a rip from the headlines. It just feels like such a cynical move to get attention on a book that is terrible. I am still reading it because I love the Image continuity that when all their characters did kind of exist in a superhero universe together. So for me, it's just a shared universe that I will read every issue of, good or bad. But this issue, it took this book from a book that just pisses me off to a book that might actually be angering me, which is a shame because as Johnny is pointing out here, Joe Casey's Wildcats and Wildcats 3.0 is one of his favorite comics of all time. It's a shame that Blood Squad 7 isn't hitting that same way. And I think one of the great things about Joe Casey is he does have the ability to tap into these weird realness beats. I mean, he wrote X-Men for a little while. He was the creator of Stacy X. Like he has this book called Sex that's a very, very interesting book about the politics of sex and superheroism. Like he's not afraid to go there. And I don't think that he should be afraid to go there. I just think that a book that was a better, more interesting book with better, more fully rounded characters could have gone there and done something and not just feel like it was sensationalist. Now we come to Blood Type. I'm like cautiously liking this book. I feel like a lot of people would like it, and I want to explain why. So it's written by Karina Becco and art by Andrea Sorrentino, colors by Dave Stewart, and letters from Richard Starkings and Tyler Smith at Comic Craft. So this apparently spun out of one of those Oni Press anthology horror books, and this is about this one lone vampire who gets stuck on a ship for a while, so she eats everybody on the ship, and now she's on this island that clearly has other vampires there, and she's trying to figure it out while she's got this guy in her thrall. I love Andrea Sorrentino's art here. Of course, I first met Sorrentino when he was drawing I, Vampire in the New 52 with Jeff Lemire, I believe, and he's really gone through a lot of transformations over the years. He got a little bit stuck on photo reference. His stuff got very overlined. I think there were, and it really stopped being fun. This is fun. Like his art is lively again. It feels fun and cartooned. It does this interesting thing in the middle where we flash back to the narrator who's kind of like this crypt keeper narrator of like all of the horror stuff, saying like, ooh, let's look at her history. And then he takes a book off the shelf, Origin of a Vampire, and opens it up to basically like tell us her history. It's a really cool device, but it's because we're like seeing these pages turn to the side and they're colored differently and all the people are so silhouetted in it. I just found it kind of hard to follow, but I still really liked it because basically she's a vampire who decided to be a vampire. Now she's in a place with a bunch of humans that are obsessed with vampires, and they have a cult of vampires, and they all wear these little tooth necklaces, and she's like, what the hell is going on in this island? I like it. It's a little slow. There's some things I don't love about the narrative, but I don't dislike it, and I think a lot of people who are always looking for like a cool vampire thing, I do think that there's something really fun and interesting here for you. Cruel Angel saying, loved how the power of reading and storytelling was the core of Ada's origin, plus the nice touch of actually reading it from the pages of the origin book the host gives us. Yeah. You guys are talking about all sorts of different stuff that I'm barely following, but I saw an interview with, oh, here you go. Okay, you added the person's name, and now I understand what's happening. I saw an interview with Karina about blood type, and it sounds like a really interesting story. Yeah, I'm with it. I mean, we know I have a lot of patience for vampire nonsense, so like for vampire nonsense to actually be intriguing and not feel like the same vampire story I've read 100 times before, that really excites me. So this is Buried Long, Long Ago by Anthony Cleveland and Alex Cormack. I wound up dropping this. It's a story about porta potties. It's a story about people who live on a farm, and their mother is kind of a Black Widow serial killer, but they're also being haunted by something. I read 2 issues. I feel like I learned all that I needed to know. But it's a fine series, and I think if you like that kind of like turn of the century kind of like horror combined with people in sad living conditions, you might enjoy it. Next, we come to Conan the Barbarian, which has vaulted into my top 20 of the year. This issue is by, of course, Jim Zub, who writes the main Conan the Barbarian title. They never put the issue number on the cover, so I never know, but I think it is issue number 23. It is drawn by Diego Rodriguez. It is, he's the colorist. It is drawn by Fernando Dagnino, colored by Diego Rodriguez, and lettered by, again, Richard Starkings and Tyler Smith. So I will say this was not the most substantial issue of Conan because it was just a tournament fight. And we know that I get very bored by tournament arcs sometimes, but this worked because it was just drawn well. Like, no story has to be boring just because we've seen that story already. And Fernando Dagnino draws the hell out of it and panels it in an interesting way. Do I know Conan's going to kill this juggernaut-looking asshole? Yeah, obviously he's going to kill him. But to do it with these tighter and tighter and tighter panels as he puts the knife closer and closer to his throat and then stabs it right through his throat, that's still exciting. You can still find an exciting moment in this moment. And then also Conan with this sorceress who basically is using him as her champion in this tournament. Like, I like that it just plays with the sexual tension. We actually, for once, don't want Conan to have sex with this person because she is definitely evil. She's got a major evil Lynn from He-Man Masters of the Universe vibe. But actually, like, the tension works. So again, this felt like a very standard issue. But again, like Fernando Dagnino, and there are all different artists in the series. There's only been one that I haven't like totally loved. Look at this page. Again, have we seen Conan break out of a prison before? 100 fucking times. But have we ever seen it with this kind of 9-panel grid that isn't perfectly symmetrical and it actually marries the bars of the prison? And the first 2 panels is him silhouetted with them walking through his own head. And then in the middle pattern, we see his bloodied hand gripping the panel as if it's the actual bar. No, like, you can make any tropey, already done story interesting if you attack it this hard. And Jim Zub attacks everything this hard. He was born to write this comic book. It is the best Conan I think has ever been since the Barry Windsor Smith era at the beginning of the 1970s. If you have even the slightest interest in Conan, you owe it to yourself to read any issue of this Titan Comics book. Titan Comics right now, we'll talk more about this later, is the only comics publisher that I have an overall positive recommendation index on, which means I've liked more Titan books in 2025 than I have disliked. Nobody else can say that, not a single other publisher. Titan is really putting it out there and getting the best of the best of the best of the best on their books. Paul Goodrum saying Conan Titan is doing such an awesome job with this franchise. Superdrop was going to say, I was going to say Hot Rita Repulsa, but I guess Evil Lynn fits. And Adrian Montana saying, I hope Zub keeps plundering those jeweled thrones for many more ages to come. Yeah, this feels like it easily could be a 50-issue run. I dropped Dark Regards from Oni Press after the first issue. It was very clever. It was about a guy who was kind of like a failed stand-up comedian. He decides, what if I decided I was just the best death metal guitarist in the world? Who could possibly tell me that I'm not? Who would even know? But apparently it like goes like a little supernatural, and now they're fighting with axes. I don't even know where it went. The art was exactly this scratchy on the interior, and so even though it had some really funny music jokes in it, I just like wasn't super compelled by it. But now sometimes I drop one of these books and then afterwards I'm like, actually that book was kind of cute. There's something kind of fun about it. So like I am a little bit tempted now, and you'll see there are some other ones like that on the show. This is Dark Stalkers versus Street Fighter, or ex-Street Fighter, I should say. Blood Throne #1 from Udon Entertainment. I usually don't read Udon books, and I don't have a lot of connection with Street Fighter, and I don't even know who Dark Stalkers are. But I just like to point out that this is written by Tim Seeley, who writes everything in the world, everything on the planet. I don't know how he has as many hours in his day that he does, but he writes everything. And if anybody's read this, please tell me if it's any good, because I just, sometimes a franchise just isn't for me, and I know I can probably safely skip it. Kane's saying, Darkstalkers, let's go! But also out this week was All-Star Superman, the Work in Progress edition, which is DC's new term for their noir books, and noir just means inks but no colors, but still letters, and this is a very famous issue of a comic book I very famously dislike, written by Grant Morrison and drawn by Frank Quitely. Now we come to the final issue of Doctor Strange of Asgard, written by Derek Landy, drawn with the best art I have ever seen from Carlos Mango, and I already like him a lot, and that's partially because it's colored by Espen Grutengern and lettered by Cory Petit. Y'all, this book delivered every single thing I could possibly want from it. This last issue does a twist on a twist on a twist. And at every twist, I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I like this. I don't know if this is good. I don't know if I'm interested. But then another twist happened on it. And the great thing was they weren't like out of the blue twist. Because sometimes books in a final issue, it just feels like they're flailing. Like they didn't think of anything good all along. So they've got to do twists. No, every one of these twists sunk us deeper into this murder mystery that has been throughout this book, that has been between Doctor Strange and his ability to master magic in Asgard. Carlos Magno went off. I mean, everything from them running down the street to finally seeing Doctor Strange unleash in the magic. And let's give credit to some of the colors on this page from Espen Grutengern, because the colors are really making this. This is one of those books that I had 20 pages of 23 pages screenshotted. And I was like, okay, we can't do that many. This is an all-time Doctor Strange story. Derek Landy got his voice perfect. He has never looked this good. I would give this to anybody who has any interest in Doctor Strange. If you like the Doctor Strange movie and you've never read a Doctor Strange comic book, this is as good as Doctor Strange has ever been. It is absolutely magnificent. It is an all-timer, and even though it's kind of rooted in the current Marvel continuity, you don't have to be reading Marvel right now to get this. It gives you all the information you need, and best news ever, at the end it says the next issue will be Doctor Strange 450, and it says it's going to have a whole all-star cast of writers, but I have my fingers crossed that means that maybe Derek Landy is going to continue this and do another series, because I think Derek Landy, Marvel has not given him a real ongoing book. He's always doing miniseries. He's been doing it for the past 2-3 years, all miniseries. This is the book. He is the guy. I need more of this. James Abel saying Doctor Strange of Asgard #5. I loved it till the last page. Why the cliffhanger and telling to read a different series? Just make it Doctor Strange of Asgard ongoing. Well, on that we can agree. And Cedric and Ellen just got her issue and cannot wait to read it. I didn't read The Escort from Cheeky Comics, another one of these Pat Shan books. One day I'll understand their release strategy, where they just seem to put out a different issue of a different comic book every single month. Okay, so then we come to the Fantastic Four. Now look, I like to lay out my biases for you all up front. I don't historically like Humberto Ramos's art that much. I used to hate him on Sinister Spider-Man. I just think his figures look so weird and distended, which works for Mr. Fantastic, not so, and maybe even Thing, not so much for the rest of them. But seeing this cover, I was like, this is pretty good. Maybe Sue Storm's arm is a little too long, but this is a really cool cover. And part of that is just, he is colored so brilliantly by Edgar Delgado that I just think it elevates him. And also he's clearly been pushing himself. Like, I've never seen him do art like he did on Strange Academy before. Plus, we know I like Ryan North, who is the writer here. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try to go in. Inherent bias is neutral. I'm so glad I did. This was another all-time great Ryan North Fantastic Four story. Baby, we're back. We're back to Ryan North writing the best Fantastic Four stories of all time. And this is not just a one-shot story. A lot of what he wrote that were the best Fantastic Four stories of all time on his 2022 run, which I do truly believe will go down as one of the best 5 Fantastic Four runs of all time, which includes this, it's continuing, this is the beginning of an ongoing story. We get a very typical confrontation with Doctor Doom. It seems like it's going to go all the places it normally goes. But then the group gets split up and sent through time. And you know what? We've seen that too. So there's nothing that interesting about it. North makes it interesting. Each of them has to deal with their own challenge in the timeline part where they are. Human Torch is trying to figure out why he's having so much trouble flaming on and breathing. And so he has to try to dredge up everything he knows about oxygen and the atmosphere. Meanwhile, Ben Grimm is just fighting dinosaurs. And actually we get a full-on dinosaur comics panel slash reference from Ryan North's scripting here for Ramos. Of course, Dinosaur Comics is Ryan North's longtime webcomic that I've been reading for well over 20 years. And then we have Mr. Fantastic. I took so many page screenshots of Mr. Fantastic. Of course, Humberto Ramos is going to be great at drawing. We see him as a kite. We see him as a giant wheel. We see him with shovel hands. And there's this reoccurring idea of this, what is it called? It's this rock. It's the Infinity Stone, the Forever Stone, where if they get stuck throughout time, they're supposed to find the Forever Stone and carve where they are in time, because then it's this really long-lasting material, and anybody who finds it at any time will be able to time travel back and save the member of the Fantastic Four who puts their current time on it. Of course, their suits have chronometers, but then it all depends, of course, on who is the latest in time to see all the other people's notes, and the person who is the latest in time is Sue Storm. I've loved how Ryan North writes Sue Storm. I love this drawing her transparently just in white shading on a landscape. What a brilliant color choice from Edgar Delgado, and this just left me at the absolute edge of my seat. I absolutely am excited by this. James Abel, this didn't work for me at all. It felt like a retelling of this first arc all over again. I mean, I can see that. It was a familiar trope, but I just felt like it was done in an original way. Personally, Reed is looking funky there. Lance, not a fan of Humberto Ramos at all. I had trepidation, one of my favorite words, about him being on Fantastic Four, because I just don't see it for us. I'm just like, I don't really see how that could be any good, but I really liked it. I really liked it. Good morning and good night from Axel Plot, and Cedric and Ellen. How many issues of this Doctor Strange run did you read? Asking her. Okay. But then there was this other comic, which was a little bit lost on me because I haven't seen the Fantastic Four movie. But this is a double-length issue called Fantastic Four First Steps that basically tells their origin story in the movie universe, and is a comic they released as the Fantastic Four with the Future Foundation in the movie universe. I wouldn't know anything about that because I haven't seen the movie. But it's written by Matt Fraction, who wrote one of the all-time worst runs of Fantastic Four, so interesting choice. And it's drawn by Mark Buckingham, the artist and writer of Fables, with colors from Alex Sinclair and letters from Joe Caramagna. This was actually really interesting. I mean, it very briefly told their cosmic rays origin and only spent like 2 pages on that. It was mostly the story of them fighting Mole Man, which I guess only is glimpsed in the movie. I don't know, I haven't seen the movie. But so this kind of expands it, and the way that it does it, it's so clever, and it's the kind of thing that Fraction is really good at, which is that it basically uses their own quotes. It shows what the media they would have been in at the time as the first superheroes in this world. And so it tells the story not through necessarily their direct recollection, but through the way they've talked about themselves and the world, and the way that Fraction recasts Mole Man here as kind of like having a whole society, and how each of the Fantastic Four reacts to that, and the difference between Reed's reaction to it and Sue Storm's reaction to it is absolutely fascinating. I think actually this feels like such a cool retell of their origin, and such a cool ultimate version of their origin. I really thought it was something cool. James Abel said Fantastic Four First Steps #1, fun advertising with pages and some fun retro pages. The stories felt like a recap of Fantastic Four #1. Well, that was kind of the point, set in the MCU. Yes, okay. Jamie C47, I always found it so crazy how Fraction Fantastic Four was so bad, while FF was so good. Well, Jamie, I think, and FF, it was just called FF, but it was the book for the Future Foundation. I think, as the story goes, if I'm remembering my lore correctly, Fraction only wanted to write the Future Foundation story. And Marvel was like, you're one of our architects. We're coming off of the Hickman era. If you want to write FF, you have to write Fantastic Four. And so Fraction was like, all right, whatever. And he just wrote whatever bullshit he could think up for Fantastic Four, because what he really wanted to write was FF. Now we come to Rob Guillory's Farmhand, which is colored, oh, let me start the clock, which is colored by Jean-Francois, oh gosh, I need my glasses back. This is really small text. Jean-Francois Beaulieu, and letter from Cody Chamberlain. We're coming up on the end game here, and let me tell you, I just have an appreciation for a book that is well planned, and you feel like the plot is going where the plot went all along. I mean, this is such a different book than it began. We went from just like, experimentation with plants and plant-based, transplants, to like a full-on Walking Dead, but with plant people. And now it's like this crazy, there's a crazy plant demon from hell, and it's all tracks. It all feels like one big story. It's all satisfying. And so now we're getting like to the very, very end of it. There's more sacrifices to be made. This book has been absolutely brutal, and the characters is willing to kill off. And I just found found it really satisfying. I don't think it was like the best comic I read this week, and I think that some of it was like a little bit repetitive, but I just really appreciate that Rob Guillory had a plan here, and this series has been writing from 2018, and he's like delivering on the plan, and it just feels so earned. And I love a book that gets the ending and it doesn't feel like we had to do any pivots. It didn't feel like there was any kind of back doors we had to go through. It feels like everything got earned and it's delivering the thing that got promised at the beginning. Absolutely check out the first trade of Farmhand if you have never read it before. I did not read Final Girl Next Door. This is a Bad Bug comic book, another one of these comic book companies that puts a bunch of stuff on Kickstarter and then they all come out all at once. Johnny making a bold proposition that Farmhand will go down as a classic once it is finished. I do think it's one, especially because it had such a big break between arcs, that people kind of forgot that it even existed. I mean, I did. And I think once it comes out in the Inevitable Compendium, I do think it's going to be one of those books that people were like, this was so great, everybody loved it. No, nobody was talking about it. It was just me. I was the only one talking about it. Yeah, I really think that its quality is a lot higher than the chatter would seem to indicate. I did read Fire and Ice When Hell Freezes Over, issue number 4. And if you remember my commentary about it from the last month of release, this book by Joanne Starr with art from Stephen Byrne and letters from Ariana Maher, I really hated the last issue. And this issue helped snap that into focus a little bit for me. So Fire and Ice are two characters that I absolutely love. This scene never happens inside the comic book because I love them. They represent to me the C-listers of the Justice League, and I don't like that for the past 15 years of the DC universe, we haven't got those C-listers. So their powers are switched. I'm going to go one page deeper here, and they're stuck in hell with a Trigon. And what we're finding out is there's a reason they're C-listers who don't have their own book. They're not that interesting on their own. This series of scenes with them just in hell together, it's just so flat. There's just nothing. I mean, it's kind of interesting because it's digging into their characters a little bit, but they're like not funny. It doesn't feel that compelling. What's really interesting here is Joanne Starr has created such a compelling, ridiculous supporting cast around them that are all in Smallville, which is why Superman briefly shows up. And by the way, great art here from Stephen Byrne. I mean, throughout. I love Stephen Byrne. And I'm into the supporting cast. And so last issue, I was kind of angry because the issue focused so much on Fire and Ice, and the supporting cast pages were just like one-offs, and I was like, well, these are annoying. Here, actually, the Fire and Ice story kind of takes a back seat because Grodd's sister happens to be one of the people living in Smallville, and so we really focus on her story as a supporting cast. And honestly, the thing that makes me happy and sad about this book at the same time is I want to keep reading about their whole supporting cast. They're so great. They're so funny. They're so human. It feels like a supporting cast that would be really good in like a Poison Ivy or a Harley book where they're just like regular people who are stuck in these hijinks. But the thing is that I don't think that Fire and Ice are like necessarily the best hijinks characters out there. And so Joanne Starr has just woven this whole cool supporting world, and it's all going to go away because we're not going to keep getting books about Fire and Ice. They don't have that many fans. And we're going to lose all these cool supporting casts. So I hope somebody else writes something else in Smallville that adopts them because they're absolutely charming. And that is my favorite part of this book. This is FML, which previously was my favorite comic book of 2025 and reigned supreme for the entire first half of the year. Of course, it is by Kelly Sue DeConnick, David Lopez, Chris Peter on colors, and Clayton Cowles on letters. This issue was not a great comic book. And I can say that still with love because this comic book appeals to my biases. So even a not great issue of FML, I'm going to enjoy. But I feel like I saw a very familiar thing happen here, which I've seen occasionally in Kelly Sue DeConnick comics before, where she wants to do everything. And she's not the fastest writer. She's said that. I'm not telling tales out of school. And so for a series that's all under her control and is indie, she's trying to do everything all at once. There's too many characters here, and they're all just popping onto panel, saying their witty line, and then popping off panel, and even having her stand-in mom character here in it to tell them, everybody freeze and shut up. It's just, it actually feels like we're inside of Kelly Sue DeConnick's head, and she even realizes there's too many characters in this comic book, which is an interesting meta thing. And so we're still playing with David Lopez, kind of drawing different versions of them. You know, we go from just sketches on paper to fully realized characters to like, you know, different vibes. Then sometimes it goes into like a whole self-help manual look. Sometimes it's got a manga look. I still like the art, but again, here it didn't feel as motivated. It felt like we were just throwing out these tricks just because it was so unfocused. So I just felt like this issue was really unfocused, and I couldn't possibly recommend it to you because I just don't think it was good. Did I still find it satisfying? Yes, because I like Kelly Sue DeConnick's voice, and I like this world that she's created. And I really do feel like that I don't, as somebody of a middling age, who is, you know, has a kid and deals with kind of like these thoughts in the world, parts of this really appeal to me. I love Kelly Sue DeConnick writing a comic book for middle-aged parents that are trying to learn to control their tempers by learning how to parent their kids. And she's got this can control, can't control dichotomy. And some of the things are the same. Can control my temper, can't control my temper. But then I think the thing that really explains why I didn't like this issue is there's this ongoing gag that starts here that somebody put trash on the floor. And it just becomes this multi-page thing of like, who put trash on the floor? What person on earth would just pat trash on the floor? And that becomes like the bit that's ongoing for like pages and pages of this comic book, but we just don't get much of a narrative in the middle. So it's just like got these 14 characters on panel. It's kind of super unfocused. We're super, super tied on to this bit of the trash being on the floor. And I just feel like we lost the heart of this comic book. The characters are kind of just being funny to be funny. So I don't mean to beat up on it. I still love it very much. It's still in my top 10. My fear is that we're going to start going in this direction where it's just so packed with ideas and characters that we lose the emotional through line about any of them. There is one great scene with the son, who is the monstrous bass player, and his father, who's effectively Matt Fraction. I guess the son, we only see him briefly there. That really, really appealed. And that was kind of the only thing about it that felt fully formed to me. So not everybody's perfect every time. And I think that this is a good indication that you can still love a book even if it's got a bad issue. James Abel's only complaint was it felt like there was way too much going on at once and needed some time to breathe. Okay, so we're on the same page there. FML is still my number one of the year, not the strongest issue, but I still enjoyed it. And also, Johnny, talking about Fire and Ice, I missed Justice League International. To me, that book does not work without DeMatteis, Giffen, or rest in peace, and Maguire. It was lightning in a bottle. We need a new JLI type of comic written by fresh and interesting creators. Yeah, and I think that's the problem when a lot of modern creators try to go back to those Justice League International characters and make them funny all over again. They're still trying to make it funny in the same way JLI was funny, but that was funny in 1987. We need a comic book that can achieve that same kind of humor today, and please just don't let Mark Russell write it, whatever you do. Okay, so now we are continuing to Free Planet. I don't mess with Aubrey Sitterson. Many of you asked why. I've just never liked a single panel that he's written, and he also comes off as a super entitled asshole in all of his interviews. He might be a good person. We are never making value judgments about people as people here, just them as comic book writers, and I don't like his approach to comic book writing, and so I don't read this book. I've heard that it's very Dune, it's very Warhammer 4K, it's intergalactic, and it's filled with tons of lore about that, so if you like that kind of thing, check it out. I really want to read this book, The Future Is by Fred Van Lent, Mario De Alessandro, Andrea Maloney, and Taylor Esposito, because I just am so hooked on the idea that it's a book from a computer security company that literally is a comic book publisher, and they're not just like promotional comics, they're actual comic books about computer security as a plot. I'm just so intrigued by it, and it just doesn't appear to exist digitally, but I want to read it. I didn't read Godzilla vs. Aliens by Frank Terry. I'm not a big Godzilla person or a Frank Terry person. I did read Gotham City Sirens. This is the weekly series that apparently is going to happen once a year, written by Leah Williams. This time the art is by Haining, who I really do enjoy. Colors from Alex Guimarães and letters from Tom Napolitano, I always say that. So in this issue, the ladies were on a heist, and they break out this little avatar-looking kid from this heist, because it turns out maybe he's who they're looking for, and it leads to an issue-long fight with Despero. And the issue-long fight with Despero is very, very cool. It definitely uses all the characters well. This page of Poison Ivy fighting him, drawn by Haining, so cool. But once again, a whole year has gone by, and I don't think that Leah Williams has found anything interesting to say with any of these characters. To me, it feels like Leah Williams auditioning to write Harley Quinn once again, and she auditioned once last year, and she didn't get the job. Elliot Kalan got the job, and that's what it feels like this year. And I'm not saying that to denigrate Leah Williams. I'm just saying there's no Catwoman. Like, Catwoman is just standing there. Even when she fights, she has no character. And even though we get this amazing scene with Ivy, Ivy's basically like, I don't like you, plants. Like, there's no texture to any of the characters except for Harley Quinn, which is fine, but then don't call it Gotham City Sirens, and don't pretend that you're not just auditioning to write Harley Quinn. And for the record, I think Leah Williams would write a great Harley Quinn. And here we are, James Abel agreeing, saying, can Leah Williams take over the main run of Harley Quinn? Another fun issue. I actually really like Elliot Kalan writing Harley Quinn, so I don't share that opinion. Okay, this is The Great War of Separation, which is a Rip-A-Verse comic book, and if they see, I think they should be called the Rip-Off Verse, based on how expensive these comic books are, but they are extra length, and you know what, even though they've got politics that apparently don't really agree with mine, and do not really value me as a person, from what I've heard, I would still read this book if there was a way to read it digitally, so I guess maybe send me review copies. I don't know, Rip-A-Verse. do something. So then is Green Lantern Corps, and I think the shine is officially off the ring on this book by Morgan Hampton and Jeremy Adams for me. Here drawn by Amilcar Nalpan, who's an artist that I really, really enjoy, colored by Arif Pranto, who's the colorist of Poison Ivy, and lettered by Dave Sharp, but it's just not good. And, you know, the reason it's making me reevaluate how much I liked the first 3 issues of this, because they were all drawn by Fernando Pasaran, who, as we all know, I think should draw every issue set in space ever at every comic publisher. Now that we're into like the art that's just okay, and I mean, this is on the good side of okay, but it's just okay, I'm realizing that these 2 authors have no feel for any of these characters. So we get Jessica Cruz, who's a Green Lantern I really love, and Joe Mullen, who's a Green Lantern I'm obsessed with, and they just feel like really interchangeable in tone. They do have, Jessica Cruz does have the whole, I'm an agoraphobe, I don't want to leave, but they go to fight Mogo, the living lantern planet, and like there's no fight and there's nothing that happens. They basically just hover in air above it and narrate like, there seems to be problems. And then they fix the problems, and then Joe is like, I knew it would make you feel better if we went on a space adventure. It's just, it's so bland. And so now I'm like re-looking at the issues of it that I did like, and I'm like, actually, this whole book has been bland. The only good thing about this book was the John Stewart stuff in the first 3 issues, because it was John Stewart, who I think is a little bit bland as a character, but also I think they had a better handle on, and it was drawn by Fernando Pasaran. So I'm actually getting really increasingly disappointed with this book. It's about to go into a crossover with Green Lantern, so I will read it, and Green Lantern is one of my favorite books of the year, but if this was just coming out on its own, I would drop it like it's hot. Or actually drop it like it's ice cold, because yeah. Jenny saying, and keep in mind this is coming from a certified youth who is less than half my age. Never been a fan of Leah Williams' writing. She has a very Tumblr and fanficky type of writing. She does tend to strike me as like, here is the panel that is funny. This is the Tumblr pull-out panel, which I've laughed at her comics before. I don't ever mean to say mean things about her. I think she's cool. She's written some things that have really made me emotional. I've exchanged messages with her in the past, but I do think her comics sometimes really feel like they're like gags just to be gags. And at some point I just want to see her settle down and like write her big thing that she's going to write. She was supposed to have an indie book at one point called Render that like I think got scuttled by the pandemic or something and never came out. I'm like, I just want to see her sit down and like write a book that's not so intentionally funny. And also talking about this Ripaverse book, saying that they're like the far to the right of Comicsgate. I don't, and this has come up in the comments of actually my last video, I don't care what your politics are if the book is good. If the politics in the book are politics that are talking about how people I love should be exterminated from the earth, then we're going to have a problem. And quite frankly, then the book probably isn't going to be very good. But you know what? You could be a mass murderer. I'll still read your comic book. It's a comic book. I don't know. I don't want to, I struggle with this every time because I don't ever want to give airtime to people that are terrible people. But if the terribleness isn't coming through in the work, then I don't know if I really care. I don't know. It's like a constant struggle, and you all can call me out on it. But I just think once, and clearly they're bad people. It's not like we're like splitting hairs about somebody who just doesn't like the music that we like, right? But I just feel like let's just evaluate the art on its own, because honestly, bad people tend to make art that sucks. And I just wish I could read it so I could tell you that the art sucks. And that's where I am on it. So I will just keep mildly making fun of it until I get a chance to read one of them and can tell you that the art sucks. I don't read Hello Darkness because it is a horror anthology and that bores me. I did read Herbie Infinity comic. It's written and drawn by Nathan Stockman with color from Matt Milla and letters from Ariana Maher. And I mean, this was kind of mild. I mean, it's all kind of mild, but this was extra, extra mild. Herbie loses his pass, and so he has to break into the Baxter building. There's just no joke. It made good use of vertical scroll, and it was very cute, and I really liked everything about the series by Nathan Stockman, but it just kind of happened. There was no joke. Okay. Then I come to this issue of I Hate Fairyland, which I didn't read because I don't read I Hate Fairyland, but I almost read it because I love that Scotty Young is goofing on Mike Mignola, and he has Unicorn Boy or whatever he's called, which is clearly a takeoff on Hellboy, but he's also like a pink unicorn with his unicorn horn sawed off. I mean, that's just funny. And that's absolutely what I Hate Fairyland is. And then we come to It's Jeff. So I just want to point out this is not actually It's Jeff. This is a digital series that was called Infinity Paws, Infinity Comic. You can go online and read all 10 issues of it. It's drawn by Nail Fuji, who also draws Marvel Meow, but it was scripted by Jason Liu. It's not in continuity. It has nothing to do with the ongoing Kelly Thompson Jeff comics. It's just about Jeff and all of the other pets get a hold of one of the Infinity Gems, and so then they bop around in space, and so we just see them in a bunch of panels with a bunch of other characters all across the world. And then eventually they fall into the clutches of the collector, and the collector makes them be in a tournament that makes no sense whatsoever. And then they wind up back on Earth. So it's not even the Jeff that you love. It's got a little bit of a loose narrative, but it's mostly just cute pinups of characters doing things. And what was so interesting to me is now Fuji, who usually is really good at using vertical scroll, absolutely is fighting against the vertical scroll here. Like, and I read all 10 issues of this from 2024, which took literally 25 seconds each to scroll through, because he's drawing all these very tiny square panels. So I actually imagine that in this comic book printed version of this that came out in the week of July 9th, it would actually, probably the art looks a lot better because he didn't try to do these giant vertical scroll toilet paper roll panels, which like we saw earlier in Avengers Academy. So actually it probably worked pretty well in that format. But I didn't really enjoy it because it's not funny. I'm not saying that all these Infinity books have to be funny. I'm just saying, like, if you're going to do cutesy stuff and it's going to have this kind of like joke cadence, then have jokes. Okay, we've reached the midpoint. And honestly, I've been keeping up so well with everybody's comments that I don't know that we have to do a lot of catching up on comments. Super Job, I hate that they put Jeff's name on this just to sell to Marvel rival fans. Yeah, I mean, marketing gonna market. It's, you know, sometimes that just happens. Johnny's saying, it's a fair take. I believe that art can stand alone regardless of the creator, but there are layers. Even I have loved art created by people who turned out to be scum. Yeah, and you know, I think it's actually, if we're like going deep to the therapy level of this, it's one of my defense mechanisms against the fact that in the same way that I just keep getting this little extra dot right there. It's one of my defense mechanisms against, I form opinions on people very quickly. I wouldn't say that I'm judgy necessarily, but like I am the kind of person who hears one story in isolation. I'm like, well, then I guess I know about that person. And because of that, there's probably a lot of comic creators that I wouldn't like, and I just think I make judgments about that, like comics too. And I don't want to compound the two. Like I don't want to have my snap judgment about if a creator tweeted one bothersome thing. Some creator I really like, it might've been Patrick Zurcher. I don't want to malign him, but it's like one of those artists that's like a really, really stunning, cool artist said just like two stupid things on Twitter like 5 years ago. And I was like, I can't look at their tweets anymore because if I keep looking at their tweets, how stupid they are is going to start to bleed into my opinion on their comics. And I always like their comics and I need to just separate those two things. I don't know that it was Patrick Zurcher, but I often feel like that. And so I think for me, since even the good people in comics can annoy me, I really try to divorce them from their art, but I try to do it in the opposite direction too, because there are like we all know I hate Jeff Lemire's comic book so much. I think he's a scourge on this earth as a comic book writer. I know you all like him. I just will never get the appeal. But he seems like a really cool stand-up person who I have nothing against. So it's kind of like a trying to cut off the bi-directional flow of my opinions. Like I'm trying to make sure that I don't skip comics just because somebody was annoying me on Twitter, and at the same time I try to make sure that just because I hate somebody's comics I don't start to think that they're a terrible person. I don't know, I'm neurodivergent, what can I say? Which is not a defense of everything, but I think sometimes it explains why I have to make up these weird arcane rules to dictate these things. Super Job with an Ask Me Anything question inspired by the future is best and favorite title of a book. My pick is Dracula Motherfucker. That's an interesting, I don't know. That's one of those things that I would have to look at my whole database. I don't know. I can't, such a good, I like books, more than books that are a clever pun. And I know this because it's just right in front of my face. These two books, what I love, but it's true. I like a book that just puts two words together that makes you question why are those words together. So like Murder Falcon, I love, why is it called Murder Falcon? And then that has nothing to do with the concept of that book, but you're like, don't all falcons commit murder? They're birds of prey. Like, I just like a book that makes you think of something, or I like a book I do enjoy a book that's a sentence, although I do think you have to worry about the title being too long because then people just don't remember it. But I love We're Taking Everyone Down With Us, because every time I'm like, wow, this book's kind of dark. I'm like, oh, right, because the title is We're Taking Everyone Down With Us. So also by Matt Rosenberg, 4 kids walk into a bank. Like, it's the beginning of a punch. It's a part of what's funny about it is a joke, right? Like 2 dogs walk into a bar, 4 kids walk into a bank, but it's actually so much more than that joke. But like it always sticks in my mind because it's this first line of a joke. Solid Snake asking me if I read Daredevil Cold Day in Hell. That is an example, Solid Snake, of bullying working, because I usually don't read these alternate universe books, but the chat after reading issue number 1 basically was like, you are missing out on something great, you're being an asshole, why won't you read it? So then I read it, and it is like absolutely one of the most spectacular books I've read. No Horn saying good to be back, have work off tomorrow so can stay for the whole show. Catching up on Karimi's art art is fantastic on Avengers. Yeah, Fred Karami is one of the big stories of the year. Him, Dev Pramalik. There's just a few breakout artists this year. Hayden Sherman, who I've like known and they've been around in previous years, but it feels like this year they're on the main stage. Johnny can't think of an all-time favorite comic title, but a recent one I loved is Where the Body Was by Brubaker and Phillips, my favorite comic of 2023. Catching up on all that Brubaker Phillips stuff, whether it's officially criminal or just criminal-esque, is on my list of deep runs. Honestly, I didn't see a ton of comic comments, I didn't quite say comics, but you can drink if you want to, that were not part of kind of the ongoing discussion. So I just don't think there's a lot for me to go back for. We kind of talked about it all as it went. Okay. So lightning round, quick call for if there's any AMAs. I'll find something to just talk about for a second, and then we'll see if there's any AMAs, and then we'll just continue. So what am I going to talk about? Oh, so I keep teasing that I've been doing this runs of all time thing. So one of the things, I don't know if this is just me being a little like ADHD, neurodivergent, or whatever. I find that there's a lot of power in writing down the things as they occur to you in your brain. But then if you don't have a system for kind of categorizing that, it just becomes junk. Like if you just always write down every cool idea you have for a song or a novel or a TV show you meant to watch or a comic book you meant to read or a joke you wanted to say on air, and all you ever do is write things down and don't ever like organize or categorize them, then you just become this crazy person with like notebooks of just random things written down. But then on the other side of that is like if you do take the time to categorize all of it, then your whole life just becomes about categorizing things that you said. And the whole reason Crushing Crisis started out almost 25 years ago, as of a couple weeks from now it will be, is because I literally wanted a little box that I could type into on the internet to put every idea and then just categorize them later. And it worked brilliantly for many years. I mean, I used to post as many Crushing Crisis as I would tweet. You know, I would post like 20, 30, 40, 50, but they weren't like blogs in the way we think about a blog post now. They're like a couple paragraphs because that's just what blogging was at the time. And over time that became onerous and hard to do. And so I just find now that for me as an aged person who has so many competing priorities, it's really helpful to me to kind of have like buckets that are already made for things to go into. So I have like my project management software that if I start to be like, oh, I want to do a thing, I need to plan it, it's going to take 5 hours, I go immediately open it. I always have that tab open on my computer and I write it down there. Now I have this sheet of like runs I meant to read. And if one of you brings up a run that I'm like, oh, I've always meant to read that, right after the show, when I go back through the comments, I will like go and put them in. And that's how we got down to 600 on that. So I think there's a lot of power in like knowing where to write the thing you've randomly just thought of. And you know what? Some people have brains where they think of the thing and then they can just remember the thing. And also they're not thinking of 2,000 things a second so that it's not so hard to keep track of all that. That's not my brain. So I need to kind of capture all of those ideas. And the thing that made me think about that was Johnny's comment about reading Where the Body Was. And I already know that Brubaker and Phillips are on that runs I want to read list. And I'm so happy I did that list because so often I'm just kind of like looking around the room being like, I should read that. I should read that. And I think what happens for me personally is like, if I don't make a plan, it's just like thoughts in my brain. So even doing that top 60 comic books of 2025 so far last week that I did as an extra stream, I've just been wanting to do that for so long. And it was just a thought in my brain for so long, and it was just so powerful to be like, we're putting it on the schedule, we're making a date, we're going to figure out how much time it takes, and that's how things get done. So I'm very happy to get it done. Johnny saying, speaking of Daredevil Cold Day in Hell, it's going to get a hardcover, but it's not getting an oversized hardcover, which is a crime, not only because the art by McNiven deserves to be oversized, but because then it would be a perfect companion to the existing Charles Soule Daredevil omnibus. It just seems like such a miss to put out a standard sized hardcover of it. Like, just put out the oversized cardcover, Marvel. And here's one AMA before we continue. Like me, I'm a massive Wonder Woman fan, says Lance McNair. How would I pitch the appeal to people who aren't fans of the character? Ooh, I love this question. To me, Wonder Woman is a multifaceted character because she is a character that you can say comes to everything with the idea of strength or martial prowess. Or you can say she comes to everything with the idea of love. And I think the thing that's so interesting about her is a good Wonder Woman story will unify the idea of coming to things with love, but using force. And I think that's different and distinct from Superman, who comes to things through, martial prowess, but he's also a bit of a peacenik. Superman would love it if everybody would not fight. And Superman comes to a place with hope. Batman comes to a place with problem solving, but Wonder Woman, it's such a unique combination to be able to do a character that's all about power and love. I mean, she's truly one of the symbols of the Greek pantheon to me that like represents the balance of those two things, and that's why she's so interesting, because she unifies them. So to me, Wonder Woman's an interesting character because there's so many ways that you can do that. The love can be the love for her friends, and she's defending them from evil. The love could be the love for the planet Earth that she's adopted into this man's world, and she is just fighting one injustice in a great vast number of injustices. Or it could be that she's fighting against a member of the, you know, mythological canon who has a very pure-minded, singular focus on war, on destruction, or on whatever. And Wonder Woman represents another generation of that that's so nuanced. And maybe that's not a sales pitch that's going to get a lot of people, but that's the sales pitch for me that makes a good Wonder Woman comic book, is that it's always like she's tough as nails and she loves more strongly than anybody else can love. And that's what is so interesting to me about Wonder Woman. Johnny's saying I'm doing a Brubaker Phillips retrospective series, so they're constantly on my mind recently. They're on the most consistent creative team in Western Comics. I would agree with that. Okay, folks. Well, there we go. We had a very brief AMA, and we are going to continue to more comic books, which is fine. Fine. We do not need to belabor the show unnecessarily. The goal is not to necessarily run for 3 hours every time. Okay. But if you have more questions, you can certainly ask them here, and I will see them at the end when we scroll back up. Okay. I didn't read Kids These Days from Keenspot Comics. Keenspot did eventually, 10 days after the fact, maybe even 11, send me that book, The Chamberlains, that I bought from them, that I was trying to review for like 2 weeks ago at this point, and it was uniquely terrible. So I'll talk about that when issue 3 comes out. I'll review the number 1. There's one other Keenspot book that I've really been dying to read, so I will give that a chance, but I think I'm just done with them. This actually looks cool. It's called Kids These Days. There's this cool cyborg warrior on the front of it, but their books are so expensive, and the quality has not been there for me yet. So I'm giving them one more chance on a book that looks like it's a little bit more mature, and so I'm interested in that. I think that might be in next week's polls or the week after. But then I think the great Keenspot experiment might have ended just as quickly as it can. So we come to Laura Kinney Wolverine, which has a cover here by Elena Casagrande. It's written by Erica Schultz, art from Giada Belviso, who's the regular artist, colors from Rachel Rosenberg, and letters from Corey Petit. This issue was so vague, and it was vague because it took a character that Erica Schultz created for her 2022 or 2023 retcon series, X-23 Deadly Regenesis. And look, I'm all for like doing a retcon series and then making the character relevant in the present day. I think that's how they should all go. But to take a series that probably not a lot of us read and to then make the current issue of this series like all about that character that we don't have affection for, and to do so little with Laura Kinney in that issue, it just doesn't really work for me. There's just not. And when we got to Murder X-Force Laura, for some reason Giada Belviso was drawing her like even like cuter and rounder than normal, and I just didn't want you to go more cartoony when we got to Murder Laura. It just really feels like I hugely respect Erica Schultz's approach to this book of just telling 1 and 2 issue stories to keep it fresh and make it easy for anybody who's curious about Laura to be hand-sold an issue in the comic book shop, but it's just too small ball for me. And I think that now looking across this run of 8 issues so far, I just only think that 2 of them were actually issues I could realistically recommend to anybody, which was the Winter Soldier issues, which seems like it just was mandated so that it could set up her joining New Avengers later in the year. So unfortunately, this run for me is kind of like on a pretty rapid decline at this point. James Abel saying, Haymaker returns, and I don't care. This issue felt like filler, and the only part I enjoyed was the cliffhanger ending. Cruel Angel saying, nice little one-shot tying back into the first story, a bit of a wrap-up before a series finale. If so, at least we'll get to see Gabby. Oh, and don't make me sad about Gabby. You better be nice to Gabby. I know, bad things can happen to characters we love, but not that character. Okay, this is Life from Delistery. It's written by Brian Azzarello and Stephanie Phillips, and that is a recipe for boredom for me, so I did not try that book. Their books cost like $16 each. Mark Miller's Magic Order is on my runs to catch up on list. I'm not going to dive in on issue 6 of series number 5, but Magic Order historically is one of the Mark Miller series I really, really enjoy. However, then we come to Magic with a K, much like Krisis with a K. And this is issue number 7, written by Ashley Allen, as we dive into a new arc and a really cool cover here by Pablo Villalobos, who I really thought it was Adam Hughes. This is written by Ashley Allen, art from Herman Peralta, who's back after a 1-issue break, colors from Arthur Hesley, and letters from Ariana Maher. This, part of my problem with this book in the first arc is it just felt like Ashley Allen, who's writing her first ongoing here, was just over narrating so much. She had so much to explain explain. She had such a big idea, and I get it. I would be exactly like that. This issue, though, felt like it had the right frame for that amount of explanation. Magic goes to this secret society that Danny Moonstar is a part of. They've got her friend captive, who's inhabited by this demon that she unintentionally let out and sealed into his body. There's just, it feels like a cool establishing issue because it's not like the second issue of the book. It's the 7th issue of the book. And we find good action in it. And at this point, I think that Ashley Allen has a really good grip in Ileana, so we can like actually learn something about her through this. And Germán Peralta's art is just next level, and I love the colors from Arthur Hesley. I wish I knew that the series was going to get 20 issues, because I do feel Ashley Allen like settling into this. For somebody in the first 7 issues of her first ongoing comic, there are a lot of way more experienced authors out there in the industry right now doing way worse than this. So it wasn't like a best issue ever, but I enjoyed it. There was no pages that I was bored on. There was no pages that didn't look great. I really think it's getting stronger and stronger. This art felt like adults, or this issue, says James Abel, felt like Adult Strange Academy. It had a few good parts, but I just don't care for these characters. Cruel Angel's saying, fine, let's play with magic. Magic gets to meet the Amanda Waller of the Eternal Dawn Society, said greatly. 3 issues left to see if Ileana can save Cal from Liminal. And Jamie C47 saying, I like the progress with the Cal plot, but the Danny and the magic friction feels contrived. I would agree with that. It doesn't feel like we're being honest about, like, Danny would not be so committed to this secret society to the degree that she's like not supporting her friend. And that's been one of the hardest things for me to get through ever since we first brought Danny in issue number 4. Like, it just feels like their conflict is very contrived. Z jumping in here, just asking, because I've mentioned that I'm non-binary, what pronouns I prefer. I'm really fine with any pronouns. I get that people have experienced me and my first name, and so they use he, him for me. I'm not going to get angry about that. I'm very happy for anybody to use they, them. I am not somebody who's super affected by pronouns, and so I don't need to like exist in that brain space for people and dictate their pronouns on me. So feel free to use whatever moves you based on my makeup look of the day. The one thing I will say, and I know we're pausing in the middle, but it was somebody new to the channel and I wanted to say welcome to them, is the one thing that really gets me, and I know that if I just made everybody say they, them about me all the time, this would probably go away as well, but I just don't care that much about pronouns. But it really gets me when people like group me in with the dudes, like Krisis and all the dudes from the Omni Bros channel. I'm like, no, I'm not a dude. I'm not a bro. It's like if you've watched The Good Place and Janet says, not a girl. That's me. Like, I just don't want to be grouped with the bro groups, the men, the dudes, the guys. I just don't. But you can use he, him. It truly does not bother me at all. Okay, and welcome to Super Panda as well. Okay, let us continue from that brief sidebar about pronouns and why I don't care about them. So this is, and by the way, if somebody cares about the pronouns, what are we going to do? We're going to respect their pronouns, because people deserve to have the identity that they have chosen for themselves and exist within, respected by the world, okay? That is what we do here on this channel. And that's why I often say, sometimes these Italians, my Italian people, sometimes their first names are a little bit gender neutral. And I'm like, I don't know, is that Andrea Italian, Andrea named man, or Andrea a lady from somewhere else in the world where it's a lady's name? So sometimes I get the pronouns wrong for these creators until I look them up. Okay, now let's look at, finally, after a long time here, parched in the desert sands, we've gotten the return of the Marvel Swimsuit Special. Now, this was written by Tim Seeley, who writes every comic book, co-written with Tony Fleeks, who I love their combos together. They're the team behind Local Man. I think I have that hardcover to unpack in my next haul around the world. Drawn by Nick Bradshaw, and that's where things get interesting. Colored by Rachel Rosenberg and lettered by Travis Lanham, because there's this very funny wrapper plot on it that maybe is in continuity, maybe it's not. Who cares? Where they're basically talking about how Roxxon is using AI to market them in swimsuits, and they're like, what if we put together our own swimsuit issue as the Avengers? Which I think that is the most hilarious possible story wrapper to put on this issue. I don't understand why you hire Nick Bradshaw, though. I'm not saying that they should look sexy in every panel, but if there was, Nick Bradshaw is like a cartoony artist to the max. Why in this instance would you not pick a Greg Land? Like, I guess because they're trying to sell the difference between the comedy of this Tim Seeley story, and it would be weird to have Tim Seeley write for Greg Land and Tony Fleeks. I get that, but I just wish the whole story was like a little bit more glossy because then the pinups were incredible. And I love that the pinups were canonical. Like they were basically going around to different heroes to being like, hey, can we get you to be sexy? Of course, this is not really canonical because Peter Parker would still probably have his mask on. So they're only like semi-canonical. But I thought it was actually a good combination of a story to actually frame why characters would be in swimsuits and then pinups. And some of the pinups are really, really great. There was this great joke at one point in the issue, which I don't know if I got a clip of. No, where one of them says, you know, they've said that these issues have kind of gone out of style because why do we care about a pinup interview or issue when we've just got the internet, which is like something I say all the time. I'm like, okay, this pinup is great. Did I need to read this issue to see this pinup? I could see anybody share. But I just enjoyed that a little bit of a wrapper around it, and there was something cute, and the jokes about AI were actually really good. It was almost like reading a comic by Mark Russell that was actually funny. James Abel, Marvel tried something different with a story about AI and swimsuits, but I don't think the message was the best, although we do need more swimsuit pages. And JDC47 saying nice pages, but I thought it was funny and a good little AI message, but where was the sauce? Yeah. And Z saying, I don't even know why regular hardcovers exist, right? Exactly. I agree. Okay. Oh, and apparently they recycled variant covers as pinups, which is annoying because then there's even less of a reason to read them. Marvel's Miles Morales, Spider-Man. Sometimes I listen back to the show and I sound drunk. Because I think I do this thing, I change my cadence up where I say one word very slow, but then I just sound drunk. I wish I had been drinking when I read this. Maybe some absinthe would have made it a good comic book look. I get that Miles Morales is a high in-demand character. I get that he's also in Ultimate Universe Incursion, which also comes out the same release week. I don't know if that's a good strategy or not. I get all that. But Cody Ziegler, this is a Miles comic book without any Miles in it. And the thing is, Cody Ziegler is good at writing Miles, and he's good at writing these gods. But to give us a whole god backdoor pilot of like War of the Pantheon of the Gods, starring Ares and Hercules and Anansi in this Miles book, where Miles just stands in the background and makes big eyes, drawn pretty well by Marco Renna, colored by Brian Valenza, and lettered by Corey Petit. It's just not good enough. It's not good enough. There's just not a Miles arc, and I've liked how Cody Ziegler has taken Miles out of his comfort zone again and again and wrote arcs that felt not necessarily like your typical Spider-Man arcs. I think that is a good way to keep a title fresh, and I see people like him, people like Ashley Allen fighting so hard to keep, people like Erica Schultz fighting so hard to keep their title fresh and keep people interested in, but I just, this is just way too marginal on the Miles for me, and I just can't get on board. This is Neverland Sands of Eternity from Zenescope. It is a one-shot that shows where a group of characters disappeared to out of the time war that's happening in the main Grimm fairy tales. And I think that this is interesting because it is drawn here by Alan Otero, colored by Grostacia. And this is a rare Zenescope comic where the insides are as good as the cover. And so often they have decent and, well, good, and also there's zombie butts as well. So often a Zenescope comic just has this very kind of like a muted indie look on the inside, and then we've got these super, super high gloss covers, and I'm just like, truth in advertising, man. So, but the thing is, this is what it was, and what Zenescope doesn't typically do is this was basically like a tie-in to an event, so showing like what's happening in Neverland right now during this event, which I kind of liked in a way, because I was like, wow, like Zenescope never really tries to achieve this sort of thing. It's a very Marvel or DC thing. But then basically, like, this could have been an email. Like, I don't know that we need 32 story pages to be like, and Neverland was also destroyed. Because I think the convention that Joe Brusha and Dave Wall as the writers are using here is that they basically created this unbeatable enemy who's just going from realm to realm and dissolving it. And even if you look at the highest stakes that Marvel and DC heroes have been against, it's never any fun to have an enemy that there can be no insurgency against, that there's no defeating, that we can't learn anything interesting. Like, that's just, to me, somebody who hasn't really like learned their lesson about superhero writing, that even when the heroes experience a resounding defeat, there has to be some kernel of progress that you get for them as characters, or else it kind of just feels like, why did, especially as a one shot, you could get away from with this as like a story in their ongoing title, like, oh, they got soundly defeated, there was no redemption to be found there. But to like sell us that as an additional issue, it just really shows that, like, yeah, maybe there's a reason that indie titles like Zenescope's titles who have a shared universe don't do these event style books, because honestly, it takes a lot of editorial fortitude to pull this off that I just don't know that David Wall, as the editor who's also the writer here, has that capacity. By the way, this was lettered by Taylor Esposito. Planet Earth, oh boy. So, hold on. We have a good chat in the, good joke in the chat here. Kane saying zombie butts. Tina Belcher from Bob Burgers has entered the chat because we know Tina Belcher loves butts. Okay. So Planet Earth is from Bad Idea Comics. Every so often, Bad Idea pops up with another bad idea, and they show up and they put out a comic book that you can't get digitally and you can't pre-order, and it just shows up at your store, or they deliver it to you in a drone or something. And so often they have great creators like Robert Venditti on this, but I'm just like, I get it. It's a whole comic book company that's designed for people who go to comic book stores and like get excited about finding some random things on the shelf. That just isn't me. So it's like so weird to look at these from afar and be like, who is this for? I know it's for people other than me. Yeah. Okay. Superjob, who recently completed a 1,200 issue read of every Zenoscope comic ever, is not a fan of Neverland in general. I like seeing the different realms getting their own one-shots. Okay. Now we come to the power fantasy. Now, I really feel like I could talk for a whole hour about this comic book and about this series and about my reaction to it. It's by Kieran Gillen. It's art by Casper Wingard, letters from Clayton Cowles, and design by Ryan Hughes. This, of course, is about this world where we've got a quiet council of X-Men, but they don't fight. They don't even especially fuck, although this issue, a couple of them did fuck a lot. And really it's just about the constant balance in play between all of them existing in the world. And this kind of has a pretty big rug pull. It is the end of the second arc, where we find out that one of these people with power is not the person we thought that he was all along. And that is an incredibly interesting twist, and Gillen nails it. The thing is, it also gets into a little bit how his power works, and if he was not one of the original kind of Omega mutants of this world, how could he have been pretending to have power all of these years if he's not one of them? And the book kind of answers it, but what's really interesting is Gillen is really rehashing a lot of his story from Rise of the Powers of X here, almost beat for beat, which is crazy. And if you remember Rise of the Powers of X, Xavier was piloting this little bubble outside of time and space so they could avoid detection from the Dominion. And Gillen basically is writing that exact scene here where they're piloting this thing throughout outside of space to avoid the destruction that's happening on Earth until they can find a way to fix what's happening on Earth, which is such a cool beat. But in a book where we've only known these characters for 10 issues and we don't even fully understand their powers, what felt like was missing from this power fantasy was the power part. It just doesn't feel like they ever explained the why behind it or the mechanics of it or what they were planning to do. So we just kept talking about like, we need 50,000 people to harness their powers in order to do this. We're losing 100 a second. We're outside of time. And it just felt so esoteric. And that is a problem I frequently have with Gillen comic books, where he gives us this brilliant setup, but then I want all those details. I want to dive deep into the function of something. And sometimes he pivots hard left and we don't get anything about the function. And it's just so esoteric and it's disappointing to me. The reason I think I liked Die so much is because Die stayed so focused on the form and the function of the world, almost to an annoying degree, but that's actually usually what I'm looking for from a Kieran Gillen comic book. But Casper Wingard's art is still incredible here, and we do get this kind of come to a head because we realize that in this world where the Quiet Council, the Omega mutants, the nuclear superpowers are constantly renegotiating their positions with each other, that everything happens by degrees, and even on a day that you decide that you're going to kill one of them, that might take years or decades to come to fruition. And so we get to the end of this issue and we realize a lot of things about the balance they've struck with each other are coming to fruition now. Plans that they put in place in 1982 are coming into play now that it is 1999, and we're seeing some of them finally make moves against each other, and that leaves us in a really interesting place that I'm actually very thrilled by. So this was like a rare issue where the first half of the issue I was like, this is dumb, I don't want to keep watching these characters have sex, can we please do something else? And then we started doing something else. This is still not to the level of excitement I had about the first arc of this book, which I just think had so much cool detail that I loved. I'm hoping now that we kind of played the esoteric game in the second arc that Gillen will sharpen his pencil a little bit and make it stick a little bit more. There's a great moment in the back matter of this book, which I didn't capture, where somebody was like, hey, this book is so good, I can't wait to buy the hardcover. Like, I read a few issues, but I'm going to wait for the omnibus. And Gillen makes this great point of like, the more you wait for omnibus of an indie series, the shorter the omnibus will be when it gets here. Indie series live and die by selling individual issues, or at least trades. And Gillen has a plan for this book that sounds like it could go on for a very long time, and it's a huge hit, but it's going to be dictated by how many people are actually buying it on a monthly basis, not how many people are gloriously waiting for an omnibus. And also, Gillen has some of the best back matter in the comic book industry, and he does not put it into the hardcovers. So if you want to read his cool essays and letter pages and things, and this has some of the best letter pages I've ever read, they're just designed really well, you've got to read the actual issues. I didn't get a notice again. Oh, a notice again that I was live. Anyway, I'm here for the 12th or 13th time. I don't know how the notifications work. I think it's maybe because I start the live so much earlier than I actually, like I scheduled the live so much earlier that you might get the notification like when I first schedule it, which is like 12 hours ago, but I truly don't know why that is. Okay. Predator, Black, White, and Blood. I was excited for this. I actually have no experience with Predator. I've never seen a Predator movie. Fun fact about me. I was excited because of the writers. We had Joe Kelly on the first story with an ongoing story that's going to be throughout this anthology with Alvaro Lopez. Then we had a second story, a one-off, which is Elliot Rahal's first work at Marvel. And I have enjoyed him indie with Brian Lovell on art and Lee Luffridge on colors. And then finally, Sarah Gailey, who I really liked her White Widow series last year, with Fran Galan on art, all that's lettered by Clayton Cowles. Unfortunately, the stories were just the thing about Predator stories, and I want to pose this in a way that if this comic is for you, by the way, it's Black, White, Blood, and Green, because Predators apparently are green. I don't know. I know this is not for me because I'm not a Predator person, so I want to explain it in a way that it might be for you. Predator stories are one of two things. They're a predator doing a lot of blood, or they're a human world where the predators represent violence in the world, but maybe they're not even the worst kind of violence in the world, and then we see a contrast. So this first story, which is by Joe Kelly, which is, I would have never guessed it was by Joe Kelly. It's so different. I would have told you it was by Philip Kennedy Johnson because there's violent sexual stuff in it. It's about this world in Australia where it's like gold rush era Australia, and this girl becomes an orphan there, and she's trying to figure out how to find her way through the world. And there's also in this world a predator, and the Alvaro Lopez art here just really, really cool. I don't really like this world of the story, but I think if you like the world of predators and like an old timey part of Earth kind of being an alternative to the violence that the people are actually experiencing in that time, then that's very cool. Then the second story, Once and Future by Elliot Rahal, it's kind of like, what if Merlin made the Sword in the Stone because he fought a predator? It was just very unfocused. I found it very, very hard to follow. And then this third story by Sarah Gailey, this was very witty. I would not want to read something like this all the time, but this particular one I really, really loved. That it's a weapons convention. It's basically like a weapon contractor convention, and they're all excited about all this weapons technology. But the predator assumes that they're all going to be these fierce warriors because they're surrounded by weapons, but they're just a bunch of fat assholes who like talking about guns. And so the predator basically just chews through them all, and he's like, well, that was boring. That's pretty witty, and I did enjoy that. Okay, I don't read Radiant Black because I think it's the most boring comic I've read in my entire life. I do read Red Hulk though, and this is taking us to an interesting place that feels a little overly familiar, as it is written by Benjamin Percy, drawn by Jeff Shaw, and art color by Brian Valenza, and letters from Corey Petit. And that's because in the last issue, we finally got the Red Hulk unleashing. We finally got him realizing that Doom is ruling the world. We finally got progress, and then he's just in a jail cell again as the Red Hulk, using up his gamma energy. That's where we started. I'm getting deja vu. Is this Memento? Why am I remembering what happened 5 issues ago? So like, I do kind of like Percy, and he's in a different prison now. He's in prison in the United States now, and they're kind of like, you're going to cooperate with us. And he's like, I would have cooperated with you anyway. So I just don't understand the beat. Like, the art is still really good. And at this point, I feel like Jeff Shaw has gotten so glossy and tuned down the scratchiness and the weird proportions of his art so much that I can't even recognize him as Jeff Shaw anymore, which is a little bit disappointing. But I do love this B story with Deathlock and Machine Man, and the way that they're now in the United States soil as well, but they're free, and so they're trying to figure out how they're going to free Red Hulk and also start some kind of insurgency against Doom. I feel like this is actually the story that Benjamin Percy seems to be the most interested in writing, and I love how Jeff Shaw draws it. I love how Brian Valenza colors it. So this book, which, you know, as I was doing my top 60 last week, I was kind of like, ooh, maybe this book should be higher, but like, this kind of issue kind of is why it's not higher. It just feels like it's been very repetitive and very decompressed, and like, it's 6 issues now, and it's mostly been Red Hulk stuck places. So I'm kind of just waiting for it to ignite. Biff Bam Pow, a comic book podcast, saying, I also heavily dislike Radiant Black. I feel seen. Kyle Higgins might be a good person. In my experience, never have been interested in a comic book by him, but I do like that massive verse, and I love Rogue Sun. So I'm not bored by all of it. I just find there's nothing fun or witty about his comics. This is Return to Skull Island, which I almost read because it kind of looks fun, but then I read that it was like a continuation of a King Kong movie that I haven't even seen, so I didn't read it. However, secretly, my secret shame, I'm not shamed. I'll say it for the whole world. I'm not ashamed at all. I fuck with Rick and Morty. I love it. I think it's smart. I think it's profane and exactly enough of being profane, and smart exactly enough being smart, and stupid enough being stupid, where it pushes the line of all three of those things all the time when it's written at its best. I love that Siobhan Thompson, who is part of the Intrepid Heroes and D20, is one of the writers for it. I just think it's a really cool world. And this is a really interesting book. It's written by Daniel Kibblesmith, who is a very funny comic writer. It's very much in continuity of the Rick and Morty cartoon, and it's leaning on like the actual accumulated continuity of Rick and Morty. So if you've been following, like, the question to ask yourself is, if I say it's not really the original Morty anymore, if you know what I mean, this is a comic book for you. And it starts out with this great montage that I loved, because it's something you can't really do the same way in the cartoon, even though the cartoon has done this, which is all these times that Morty has been in a lot of trouble and Rick is just berating him. Morty, I need you to swallow this. It's technically a parasite, but Grandpa's going to cut it out in time, okay? Oh shit, Morty, it's the elevated apocalypse story. It's not just for gamers, Morty. You get awards for this shit now. But to then like have Morty just sweating it out in each of these scenes, I love that. And so that was a really good way to open this book. What's funny is the art by Jarrett Williams, colored by Alessandro Santoro. It feels like a little clean. Like actual Rick and Morty is like a little more jagged and dirty than this. It almost felt like it got like Simpsonified. But basically, it turns out that the personification of the universe is friends with Rick. Of course he is. And so to have a bachelor party for the personification of the universe, they have to go outside the universe at what is clearly a reference to the restaurant at the end of the universe from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, one of my foundational texts. And it's funny. It made me laugh the whole time. There's so many great meta jokes. And again, it does that great thing that a good kind of adaptation of a thing like Rick and Morty should do, whereas the meta jokes were about it being a comic book instead of about it being a cartoon. This is just really delightful for me. And a lot of the Rick and Morty comic books just feel like they're kind of recycling the cartoon. They don't feel like they're uniquely taking advantage of being a comic book. This one does. So I really enjoyed it. And for some reason I have the cover twice. Okay, you gotta buckle up because this shit is crazy. So I have been tentatively going back to Savage Dragon because it's one of my 90s nostalgia reads. It's by Eric Larson, of course, and it's edited by somebody I'm friends with on social media, Gavin Higginbottom, who is one of the few people in the world who reads more comics than me. This is lettered by Jack Morelli, colored by Nikos Koutsis, and flatted by Mike Torres. So Eric Larson is doing this arc where he's looking at all the dragon kids. Now, if you haven't been keeping up with this book, it's a book all about sex. And it's every issue is like the dragon and his partner just having sex and various parts of her genitalia flapping around on panel. So it's kind of a strange pivot to tell now 4 stories about the kids in this book. So there's one kid, I think his name is Jackson, who's the son, he's the 10-year-old son of Savage Dragon. He meets the Bay Area Guardian, who's this San Francisco superhero. And Jackson's like, I want to go adventure. I'm almost 10. Robin was 8 when he started helping Batman. And so they have this like fight, and it's actually really good. And I love how Kirby looking Larson's art gets as he gets older. And so he beats the Bay Area Guardian, and then he's like, it seems you won't take no for an answer. So just this once you can come on a mission. And Jackson says, okay, now what's going on? And direct to camera, Bay Guardian goes, sex trafficking. Sex traffic is not funny, but it's so funny that Larson goes through this whole sequence of being like, this is a kid's book. I'm just like Robin with Batman. This is going to be all ages inappropriate. I'm only 10. And then then he's like, what kind of adventure we're going on? and the answer is just sex traffic. And then on the next page, the kid's like, I'm 10. I don't know what sex trafficking is, which I'm like, okay, that's actually funny. But then the Bay Area Guardian is like, I'm now going to give you the Wikipedia definition of sex trafficking. What is happening? What is happening? So then it was just so funny. Cry. So then they go to fight the sex traffickers, who are these old Savage Dragon villains, and the fight is really cool. And it's ripped right from Invincible, where this young, strong superhero character doesn't know his own strength, and so he beats the crap out of these characters in a way that's actually very disturbing. Just this whole striation of her psychic powers and the way that it's affecting everybody, and the way that it's colored, like, this is really cool. Somebody worked their ass off to flat this and color this, right? But then So then he like frees all these people who've been sex trafficked, and I'm like, okay, actually look at that stocking in the front. Like somebody went off and drew that pattern on that stocking. Amazing. So then we get to the end, and I'm like, wow, this was a journey. Like I went through it reading this comic book. So then we get to the end, and Ice bursts in, and he's like, all of you have been trafficked from other countries, and we're going to deport you to those countries. And the kid is like, I just freed these women from sex trafficking. Like, you can't arrest them. Like, let's do something good for them. And they're like, what are you, an alien? We're arresting you too. And so they come in, and he's like, my dad's going to find out. And Ice is like, your dad's not even going to know where you are. And that's where the issue ends. I felt like I was on drugs. Like, that was the absinthe that I wish that I drank during that issue we were talking about earlier. So look, I don't know that I could recommend this book to you, but I specifically was thinking of Max Appleman here, because the whole time I was thinking of it, I know that Max loves crazy off the wall shit like that. And I was like, this is a Max book if there ever was one. Some of you are going to be weirded out by the idea that the 10-year-old dragon rescues the sex workers, and I am not disagreeing with you, but Eric Larson really, I mean, I could have never expected this, and I know we've now been talking about it for 5 minutes, but I just need to convey to you my level of shock and pure entertainment as I was reading this book. Eric Larson has said that he's losing money on Savage Dragon and is just doing whatever he wants. Fuck the credits. And you know what? Love it for them. Love that for him. Biddy Moss saying, this is how I can pitch a comic. It is everything I just promised you and nothing more. Okay, now we come to my indie pick of the week, The Savage Sword of Conan. This was drawn, oh god, the credits are so small. This was drawn and written by Patrick Zurcher, and then the backup story, oh, we'll get to that. Okay, so this was an all-time great Conan story. He's adventuring with Valyria, who's one of the many women in his life, and, you know, every Conan story is the same Conan story. They go somewhere, he wants to steal something, he wants to sleep with some lady, things ensue. The things that are interesting are what you do with it, right? I don't think anybody's looking for you to revolutionize the idea of Conan. In this instance, they go to a kingdom that he feels like he should be welcome in, and they're saying, we're experiencing a drought, and we've got this cool court wizard, and so we're going to send you with the court wizard to try to get this ever pouring vessel so that we can solve our drought. So they go off to solve the drought, and he goes through like a really intense adventure that of course the people are going to get picked off. Of course it's just going to be down to Conan at the end, but it's like the lore is so deep. And again, Patrick Zurcher, I've loved him on many things. I loved him on Savage Avengers. I've never seen him draw like he's drawing for Titan Comics. It feels like somebody finally gave him permission to go as deep and as hard as he's ever wanted to in every single panel, and he is like great. He is doing the work of a career here, and this was written such a tense way. So they're on this ship, Conan's arguing with Valyria, and the great thing that happens throughout the story is it's kind of like plays this beat of like what happens with Conan and one of these adventurous women that he loves after they have sex. What's the next day like? What happens as they grow apart? And there's a literal great page, I should have pulled it out, of them kind of having a distance between them but still feeling that it's supposed to be adventuring together, which is like a beat I haven't seen a lot of people play. And then they're stuck with each other for this whole adventure, but you see that they do still have things in common and have reasons to like each other. This was a brilliant black and white Conan one-shot story. I love the way that it wound up. I love the horrific aspects of it. It was just, it's unassailable. It was so good. And of course the letters are by Comic Craft, Richard Sarkings, and Tyler Smith. Then the backup story is written by Fabian Cieza, and it's drawn by Sean Chen, who actually came on the channel and commented a couple weeks ago, when are you going to read my story? I'm like, I'm a little bit behind. I'm getting there. Of Kull, who is another of Robert E. Harris' characters, and it's just drawn so brilliantly. And it's about how Kull gets this cool new armor, but then his kingdom is somebody lays siege to the kingdom who's wearing invisible armor that basically is like almost a refractory armor that's all of glass that is an invisibility suit, and you can see it just kind of glinting at the bottom of this page. Just like a really cool, fun action story written incredibly well and choreographed really well. I was like, hell, maybe we need to see Fabian Cieza writing in this Conan verse. I just absolutely loved it. I did not read Six Shots 1 of 2 from Bliss on Tap Publishing. I did not read The Slasher's Apprentice. I've already dropped this. It's about a girl who has a podcast who's obsessed with a serial killer, but actually she's helping him be a serial killer. Maybe he is not that good of a serial killer to begin with. It's okay, but I kind of felt like I got the whole concept in the first issue, and I did not need to keep reading it. Then I read Snow Monkey. So look, almost always like comics from Red 5. I just think that as a publisher, they tend to greenlight cool stuff. And they don't put out a lot of comics every year, so I always go in. This comic, it's like teetering on the edge of being great. It's written by Jason Shaw with art by N, colors from Chuck Obach, and letters from Seda Temafante, who I haven't really seen lettering very much lately. This art is great. This actually reminds me of Sean Chen in some way, like when he used to do a lot of covers. Like it's so airbrushed, and I love this girl who's got this helmet that's the snow monkey helmet that gives her all the knowledge of all of the people who've had this title in the past, and some of them are good or some of them bad, very similar to Rogue Sun, right? And it's got a really cool fight, and like the fight is so kinetic. The colors are so good from Chuck Obach. And then it kind of just ends, which would be fine if we were not in a 4-issue miniseries, but this is a 3 of 4, and it's kind of like the first issue was her origin, the second issue is her just wandering around her high school, and then the third issue is a fight scene. Like, who are we making this for? What are we trying to achieve here? Like, are we trying to get an ongoing series out of this? Because it feels like if we're just intent on just telling like a one-off story about this cool superhero, why not just tell more of a story? I don't understand how we went from an origin to her sitting in high school to like a fight scene. I don't feel like I'm like getting to know her at all, but the craft is so good. It's just like the pacing is weird. It's one of these things that like, I kind of wonder, did these people have an editor? Does somebody sit down and go, ooh, let's go through your scripts and like see if it makes sense before they like sat down and started drawing it? So once you start drawing it, it's too late to edit a fix in, okay? Now we come to the other Patrick Zurcher book of the week, Solomon Kane. And before I even start the clock, I need to give you some context on this because he wrote this very, very loving back matter, which I actually clipped so I could read it for you. And they're asking him about it, and he was like, he loves Solomon Kane. He's always loved Solomon Kane. And he talked about all the notes he wrote for him and everything. And they asked him, is there any scene or moment you're proud of in this miniseries? And he says, that's hard to answer. I don't mean this arrogantly, but this is the best work I've done in comics because it's the most personal. It becomes that when you write and draw the story. The character and the genre are ones I've had a real affection for since I was a teen. I'll say I love Solomon Kane and Diamante Ben Said scenes the most, but he goes on to basically say that they approached him to do some kind of Conan work or anything because they really liked his work on Savage Avengers that had Conan, and he was like, well, are you also going to be doing a Solomon Kane book? And they said yes. And so basically he says at the end, they're going to have to pry Kane's flinthocks from my fingers. There are so many stories to tell, and I have all of those notes. After all, fans of Solomon Kane and the series of something to look forward to. This is the best news that I have read in eternity. He was born to do this. In the same way that Jim Zub was born to do Conan, they found their guy. Patrick Zurcher, he's done a lot of great comics, writing and drawing. I've never seen him do anything like Solomon Kane. I don't care for this character. I don't care that much about Robert E. Howard. I mean, I'll always check it out because I like Pulp Fiction stories, but like, it just makes so much sense because my reaction to this has been so like viscerally like, oh my God, it's the best story I've ever read. And it makes sense that he's obsessed with this character. So he draws and colors this book. And gosh, the credits are so small. He has a color assist by Pete Panzis, and it's lettered by Richard Starkings and Tyler Smith. This is the final issue of this, and it is so satisfying. It ties up all the strings. It gives us moments with all of the characters. There's big, big action, but the action doesn't just feel like action to have an action movie. It feels like action that's resolving conflict. Action that's like giving all of these characters the final moment to shine or the final comeuppance that they might deserve. They find the treasure, they fight the serpents, they break out, and like everything about it paid off, including like who these people are at their root. This is one of the best miniseries I've ever read, really. It was gorgeous from front to back. The characters were very specific. It was high adventure. It kept me on the edge of my seat. And honestly, this earned Patrick Zurcher like a 5-year pass to I will buy anything that he writes, especially from Titan Comics. I cannot recommend this highly enough. It does not matter if you don't know who Solomon Kane is, because I only very vaguely understood him. And per Patrick Zurcher's notes at the end of this issue, this is set before all of his typical adventures, not after. So this is actually kind of like a little bit of a Solomon Kane prologue. He's usually a much older character. I cannot recommend this highly enough. I hope you are hearing my words. Okay, let's continue. Didn't read Lower Decks because I haven't been reading or watching the show, but I am going to commit to checking out some Star Trek comics because so many of you are really liking them. I'm going to make the jump to reading it on the page. But now let's talk about another thing that happens in a Star War, because this is one of my favorite comics of the year. It is Star Wars Legacy of Vader, which focuses on Kylo Ren between episodes 8 and 9. It's written by Charles Soule. We have our first arc artist, Luke Ross, back on art here, still colored by Nolan Woodard, lettered by Joe Caramagna. And I know that this is the lettering show. I'm sorry, it should be the lettering show, but often it's the coloring show. It's sometimes the lettering show. The colors in this are so good. Luke Ross's art does not lean a lot of dressing up. He does great likenesses. He does great technology. Notice what's happening here with Nolan Woodard's colors. There's no shine layer, which is often something I talk about with Mark DeGracia. He's still doing lighting. There's lighting on Huck's face. He's half it's in shadow. She's illuminated by the screen, but there's none of that like glossy white highlight. It's perfect for Luke Ross's art because I don't think he needs that extra dimensionality added to his art. It just works. This is such a cool scene. Basically, Kylo Ren has been going around ruling the universe with an iron fist, but at the same time, he's like trying to make a connection to Darth Vader, and he's so conflicted because he's also part of the rebellion, and so he's like, he's talking to Hux, and he like basically Hux was gonna conquer some planet that Kylo Ren told him to conquer, but then at the last minute, Kylo Ren comes in and conquers it himself, and Hux like, what are we doing here? You're supposed to yes and me, bro. And Kylo Ren is like, does that make you feel small? And I just love that he's like crazy. We are seeing Kylo Ren just be a total crazy person as he is being manipulated by Vane, who is kind of Darth Vader's body man, who's now been waiting for Vader to come back for so long. And he's like, well, I've got Kylo Ren here, but he kind of want to like, he almost wants to like torture Kylo Ren until he turns him into Vader, which is crazy. But it also is like such a better version of the theme of the final movie where they're like, oh, Rey is a Palpatine, let's make her a vessel for Palpatine or something, which like there was no time or idea or commitment put into that. Here, it's like so messed up, and there's a messed up character to begin with, and it makes sense that he's been like sent down the dark path of Darth Vader, and I'm just so here for it. This character now is suddenly a character that is like cool, who like makes sense to me, who I'm just so addicted to and really, really into it. I see you all in the chat talking about Conan and Solomon Kane, but we're just going to keep moving and we'll catch it at the end. Now we come to Supergirl number 3, which is kind of the end of the first mini arc by Sophie Campbell. And here's the thing. I get that Sophie Campbell's not for me. I learned that in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I love her art. I mean, I love the faces. I love the expressiveness. The art is so adorable. I love it colored by Tamara Bonvillain. Of course, Becca Carey is one of my favorite letterers in comics. I just like how square and readable Becca Carey's letters are. She puts the emphasis in the right place. The word balloons are like well measured. It's just like, and she knows when to pop out something like spicy mac and cheese sandwich from Midwell Munchies. And it never gets in the way and it never feels cumbersome. But this, it's just a YA comic, which is fine. And I know that some people want to just read Supergirl as a YA comic, but I also know that a lot of people came to Supergirl via Woman of Tomorrow. And I know a lot of people have been following Supergirl's transition through the New 52 as like she was a Red Lantern. She had to get control of her rage. So to like go to a Supergirl comic where she gets shot with black kryptonite and she just turns to Satan Girl. And she's just like, you can't tell me what to do, Lesla Lard. I'm going to wreck your lab. Ha ha ha. Say bye to all your science junk. It's just, it's very DC superhero girls, which is fine. And I love DC superhero girls, but it just feels like a weird choice to put this comic in current canon, knowing that we're moving towards a Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow movie. It just feels so dissonant to who she is. So it's well made. And this is one of those ones where like, I think it was pretty boring. I think it was just like a very dull, exactly what you might think you would get YA comic book that happens to have these characters. And I think it's fine to have YA books in DC continuity. I loved Shazam. It was YA and it was in DC continuity. But I just feel like there's, with the strength of this art team, if they'd put a different writer other than Sophie Campbell on it, we could have been getting something extraordinary. And unfortunately, I just don't see Sophie Campbell getting past this very small ball goofy YA book. Now it does end in an interesting place where she's getting summoned back to Kandor to like stand trial for crimes, but that's just going to be cute too. That's just what Sophie Campbell does. James Abel saying, I dropped it. It wasn't for me. Jamie C47 saying, I really like the art, but I think I'll drop this now the arc is over. I'm not a teenage girl. Nothing against that. It's just not for me. And Adrian Montana saying, I'll read it when it finishes. So I'm seeing the sentiment widely, and I don't think it's just me. With Ninja Turtles, I was like, is it just me? Everybody else seems to like this. But in Supergirl, who I think a lot of people have found a lot of reasons to like over the past 15 years, I'm seeing this widespread sentiment of like, it's not bad. It's just not the Supergirl comic that any of us were asking for. Okay, let's continue to Superior Avengers. This is a really interesting series by Steve Fox with Kyle Holtz on the flashback art, which is actually from the future, confusing, and the present day art, which is actually our present day, by Luca Maresca, colored by Mattia Incono, and flashback colored by Rachel Rosenberg here on this page, lettered from Corey Petit. This does this interesting thing where it kind of like lays it out on the line, but it also puts a twist on a twist on a twist, and you've heard me say good things about several books that have put a twist on a twist on a twist over the course of this show, but it just feels like, especially to be in issue, what are we, 3, 4 here? 4. It just feels like we're so early in this series to twist and twist and twist. Here we find out that the ghost from the future is not Ghost who we thought she was, and the Avengers in the present who are from the future, who are not the Avengers we thought they were, are also doing something else that we didn't know that was the thing that we thought that they were doing. And it's just like, Steve Fox, calm down. He does this in a lot of comic books, and I like Steve Fox. I think he's a cool dude, and I think he's a good writer. But it just feels like is on a mini series where he's like panting and panting and panting to get it all out so quick, or he gets something more substantial and he's just trying to put like 1,000 ideas down at once. I'm not saying this is bad. I'm actually into the twist on twist on twist. It's interesting, but it's just like, for a book full of characters who we don't even know, it just feels like I don't know that we need that many more twists on them. We don't even know them. Just them existing as a twist. Okay. Yeah, Superdrop pointing out on that Supergirl tone that the Mariko Tamaki Supergirl that was in Action Comics at the end of last year was perfectly in keeping with Woman of Tomorrow. So then to pivot to this just feels really tonally inconsistent. This was my DC pick of the week. It is Superman Treasury, which was a giant size issue in every form of the word. I understand it was large if you got it physically. It was like 70 something pages long. It was written by Dan Jurgens with art from Bruno Redondo and colors by Adriano Lucas, who are the team from Nightwing. But Dan Jurgens also did a sequence on his own, which was inked by Brett Breeding and also colored by Adriano Lucas. And let me just get that out of the way. I'm an easy mark for Dan Jurgens. I think anytime you get Dan Jurgens or Jerry Ordway on a Superman comic, I'm going to like it, because I am just from this era and I just like Dan Jurgens doing Superman, right? So there's that. But then to take this dream team of Bruce Redondo and Adriano Lucas, who had been on Tom Taylor's Nightwing, I don't know that anybody draws more pleasantly clean art in the DC universe, and I think their art actually works better for the Superman world than it even did on Nightwing. And I love that we start in Mita Ray, like right in the middle of this problem. There's something big happening in Metropolis, and this is set basically early in Rebirth, where John is still a teen, which we love, because before Bendis, Agent Nova, and Alfred is alive here. So it kind of gives us a tone for what it is. And I like it because, to me, when you're going to do one of these like one-off stories, let me really try to encapsulate this, because I had this very deep thought while I was reading this beautiful, beautiful book. Wow. If you're going to tell one of these stories about Superman that doesn't fit into current continuity, there's like 2 ways to do it, right? There's just set it outside of continuity. It's just Superman has a fight, it doesn't matter. Or grounded in continuity. And I think to set it outside of continuity, that's fine, but we could tell 100 stories that way. It loses its resonance. Because when it's in continuity, we're like, well, how did this get resolved? How does this fit in? These characters are acting in a way that's consistent with how we know they're going to act. As soon as you say that this book doesn't count and it's outside of continuity, we're like, well, it doesn't matter how they act, and it doesn't matter who dies. And so we lose, even though we know anybody could die, we lose the tension of how do they stay alive. And so then we just get the cheap death. Wonder Woman dies, Martian Manhunter dies, Batman dies. And it's like, actually, to me, not that exciting. I'm much more interested in how will they survive this. And if we look at the Superman Evergreen show that we did on Near Mint Condition, so many of our Superman choices, well, not our, because I wasn't one of the panelists, I just moderated, were outside of continuity. And I just think that's so dull. It basically tells me the only thing interesting you can do with Superman is make up a story that has nothing to do with the stories we know about him, because the stories we know about him aren't any good. But this leans into all the things we know about Superman, his parents, his origins, his death, his son, his loves, his colleagues, and for that reason, it's great. It's just a great one-off Superman story with fantastic art. Could it have been a whole arc in Dan Jurgens' Superman? Yeah. Could they have released it as like a 4-issue miniseries? Yeah. But to put it out as one OGN, it's powerful. It flows. It kept me going. And then to get to the middle of basically this whole recap of all of Superman's background as drawn by Dan Jurgens. Come on. Come on. Nothing. I will not hold back that I cried about this, because to see the Superman that looks right like the Superman from the 90s and know that it's the same guy writing it now, I know that's me, I know that's my nostalgia, I know some of you weren't even alive then, but to me, to see how good Jurgens is still today, now, writing Superman. He, to me, is one of the most definitive writers of this character, and this was just a fun story. Fun from front to back. It was big, it had action, the whole Earth felt threatened, it felt like it was deserving of an issue this big, and it resolved in such a way that I can still believe that it happened within continuity, but even if you don't know any continuity, it doesn't matter. All this felt like a Cliff Notes of Superman history with a spice of Doctor Who mixed in wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. Oh, I guess, because Superman is kind of hallucinating in a timey way, and at one point I was like, what's going on here? Is this out of continuity? But there's a story reason for it. But I think that was just like one aspect of it. I didn't really see that as the main aspect. Adrian Montana's loved this treasury. So glad that his local comic book store held it for him. Look at this art. Really liked Superman Treasury Edition, says Biff Bam Powell. I get it physically, and I love Redondo's art, and I'm happy to see him in the book with good writing. Not a Tom Taylor fan at all. Sorry, a great one-shot. Yeah, many people feel about Tom Taylor the way I feel about Philip Kennedy Johnson. So many people loving this book. Planet 628, I'm so glad I bought this book. Super Jop saying Jurgens is the most important Superman writer of our generation. Word up. I completely agree with that. Okay. Now we come to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Nation. And this got back to the thing that I put this book in my top 10 earlier this year, which is that the Ninja Turtles have such a huge supporting cast. And with Jason Aaron hyper-focused on the four main turtles, we just, there's all these characters that many of us who've been reading this book for years love and are missing out on. And so this, I think there's a fine line between just throwing them in any old adventure just to get them in a book, which I kind of feel like happened with the Bebop and Rocksteady story an issue or two ago, which like, it didn't have a reason to exist. They were just in Las Vegas to be in Las Vegas. It had nothing to do with like, let's check in on Bebop and Rocksteady. This issue had two stories that really felt like we were checking in on the characters. This first Tom Waltz story drawn by Nelson Daniel and colored by Rhonda Pattison, who is the absolute vibe of Turtles when Rhonda colors it. This felt like a story right out of the late 80s or 90s of the Ninja Turtles run. It follows this character, Angel, as she's got a suit to wear now, but the two scientists that are kind of helping her out and advising her, and they're always fighting. And it gave me a reason to be reminded that like, oh yeah, I was kind of wondering where this character is. And it felt very true to her character, and I really liked it. And then the second story, I love that they have Paul Aller writing all the secondary stories here. I love that it was about Mayor Stockman and that he might be making a presidential run, contrasted with also the mayor of Mutant Town. And so one story happens on the left and one story happens on the right, and they're totally parallel. I think Paul Aller did a great job of structuring that. Great art from Barnaby Bugenda, colors from Marco Lesko, and it really, really worked as eventually their story kind of intersects in the middle. And again, this is what I want from a supporting Turtles book. Let the main book focus just on the Turtles. We need a lot of time with them, but give me a supporting book who just, there's this huge universe around them. And I think for those of us who read it a long time, we want to see that continued to be expanded. So I really enjoyed that issue. So this is a new Toxic Avenger ongoing, and Ahoy is taking a bold approach with this, as is writer Matt Bors, who wrote that Toxic Avenger miniseries that I really enjoyed, even though it was so deeply weird so far this year, which is that they're doing a different one-shot story in a different tone for the first 5 issues. This one is a horror issue, and it was very weird and horrific, but they're going to do a romance issue, a sci-fi issue, and then eventually it's going to get to an ongoing story starting in issue number 6. I'm a big proponent of doing one-shot issues. I just don't know how all of those kind of vibes are going to work for this book, but this is with the main artist, Fred Harper, with Lee Luffridge on covers and colors and Rod Steen on letters. It was really, really good. I love this Toxic Avenger. I love that he just wants to defend his town, and he was like a terrible kid that everybody hated. Well, he wasn't bad, but I mean, true people cheated him terribly. And so now to him to be this awful disfigured mutant, it's really no different to him. And I really enjoy that vibe of it. And this got really actually disturbingly scary. It was really like an X-Files. It was like the whole thing was like a vintage season 2 or 3 X-Files episode, only with Toxic Avenger at the center. And it just really, really worked for me. And it like actually did creep me out. It's hard to scare me with a comic book. So I'm like, it's a comic book. I could close it anytime I want to. And I think a lot of times comic books, in order to scare you, will try to disturb you because they know the disturbingness is lasting. And this was disturbing, don't get me wrong, but it also scared me in the way that it disturbed me, which I think is a rare win. So I'm here for more Toxic Avenger. It's so weird. There's nothing you could compare it to, and I enjoy it. Now we come to Transformers, issue number 22. Only 2 more issues after this before we wave goodbye to Daniel Warren Johnson and George Corona, and it is taken over by Robert Kirkman and Dan Mora. This is colored by Mike Spicer and by Russ Wooten. I really, I think, hit my nadir with this book. I just don't think it's about anything. I do really enjoy this beat that's playing out on Cybertron, where they're like, we will give you enough power to send one person back to Earth, but we've got our own problems here on Cybertron. That to me represents the part of this book that's good, the kind of like big beats of the society of Transformers, and that you don't have to follow each one of their personalities because there's bigger themes going on. But then when we get back to Earth, every single issue I say this, and I'm sure you're getting tired of it, but the art doesn't understand how to tell a story here. This is one of those pages where I stayed on it for 5 minutes because I was like, what the fuck are you thinking? So we're in this big hangar because clearly it's got to be big if Optimus Prime can walk through a door. So we walk through the door and we're looking at him over this person on this table. Well, person, it's a transformer. So then we see him getting closer to the table, but all of a sudden the people that were behind him at the door are in front of him. Now we're behind his back leaning over the table. Now somehow we're at eye level with him leaning over the table, but it's also the angle's hitched up so high that we can see a human standing on the ground behind him. So it's almost like we've totally 180'd the angle in that one. But then for some reason he starts freaking out and shooting lasers somehow. We have no idea where he is in the space there. Here we see him falling down. Table with the person on it, nowhere in sight. This guy in the orange vest was behind him. Now we see him to the side of him. So what's falling? I looked at all the things in this picture. Where's this wide open space in this room? We have no idea from the geography of it. And then there's this thing behind this guy that starts exploding. I know what this artifact is because I've seen it elsewhere in this story, but where was it behind him? Point to me the other part on the page where we've seen this thing. So why would it make sense that something's happening with it? Because we don't know that he's anywhere near it. Here, if we look at the panel on the left of the bottom of the page, he's got another transformer standing behind him. So how did this big orange thing get behind him? This is the problem with every issue of this book. You can tell that Daniel Warren Johnson in the script is not thinking about the geography of the script, and maybe that's because he's used to writing for himself, and so usually he just figures it out as he goes, and George Corona draws so similarly to Daniel Warren Johnson that like maybe it would make sense to him, he thinks, but like page after page, issue after issue, the basic geography of this book does not make any sense, and that's a problem. If you have a book about blocky robot people who all kind of look similar, if the geography of the book doesn't even make sense to get us through a scene, how are we supposed to have feelings about them? How are we supposed to get the action? How are we supposed to care about what's happening when I just can't figure out where he's falling and why? I see Lance saying he's logging off. Good night to Lance. We haven't even hit the 3-hour mark yet. I might bring it in under time. Okay, now we come to Ultimate Spider-Man Incursion. I'm sorry, I will warn you, this was a pretty good week for me overall, but at the end of the alphabet, it did not go well. So apparently I didn't save the credits for this, so I'll have to read them off the cover. Dennis Camp and Cody Ziegler are co-writing it. Jonas Scharf is the artist, and it is colored by Edgar Delgado. I'm so sorry I do not have the letterer credit. This was pretty remarkably, terribly bad for so many different reasons. Part of it is just, Jonas Scharf cannot draw people's faces. I mean, I don't know if he's seen a face before. Look at this page. What is happening on all of these people's faces? It is wildly bad. So I think it was one of those things when the artist was chosen because he's good at a certain thing, which is Miles and his mask. But then when we have to see him draw Miles's face, it's like so bad, and it changes in every panel. But then there's but here in the Spider costume and Black Panther in the Black Panther suit, that looks great. So clearly the guy was chosen because he can draw masks. But then here's the other problem with this is that Dennis Camp and Cody Ziegler don't understand what they've got on their hands here. What this could be doing, and what it seems like they're hinting at it doing, is using Miles as a mechanism to finally connect all of the different things happening in all the Ultimate Universe books. So it's not just Miles having an incursion into the Ultimate Universe, it's the Ultimate Universe books finally tying into one another. So we go from Miles being with Spider-Man in the first issue, we throw that out the window. Here he's with Wasp and Hank Pym from Ultimates, but they go to visit Black Panther. And that's kind of cool because we're like, wow, why wouldn't the Ultimates have approached Black Panther and Wakanda? But the whole issue is basically them just like shaking hands with each other over and over again. And again, the whole idea that like Billy, his little sister, is just being used as this bouncing beach ball to carry us throughout the plot, and it doesn't really feel like there's any reason for any of this to be happening. We've had so many reasons for the Avengers to meet Black Panther for an interesting reason, to motivate it with Miles here, and to get such a nothing story drawn so badly out of it. This is tragic. Like, I cannot get over what a complete train wreck black hole of a bomb the Ultimate Universe has turned into after such hopeful beginnings. I just think it is absolutely embarrassing what they are doing with it right now. James Abel saying Black Panther crossover issue, and it's another issue that didn't work for me this week. The series is Where on Earth is Billy Morales? Said perfectly. Oh, I did have the credits. I just didn't put it in my background PDF. So the letterer was Corey Petit. Okay. Uncanny Valley. This is so strange. This is the last issue of this series from Tony Fleeks and Dave Watcher. I love Dave Watcher's art. It never came out digitally. And I checked. The physical issue came out. People reviewed it. Previous issues came out digitally. I bought number 9. I went back on my Kindle and I have it. But number 10 just never came out digitally. It just never came out. So I didn't get to read it, and when it comes out, I'll read it. Somehow, did I miss a whole series? Oh no, it's next. It's next. So guess what? I got done so far ahead this week, and I apparently hate myself so much that I took some time to read the Uncanny X-Men. I caught up on the whole previous arc, The Dark Artery, which is truly one of the stupidest X-Men arcs that I've ever read in my life. It was just unreadable. I hate it so much. To get to this one-shot issue, Murder Me Mutina, written by Gail Simone. I wish it wasn't. Art by Luciano Vecchio. Colors from Rachel Rosenberg. Letters from Clayton Cowles. Here's the thing. These new outlier characters, every issue has Tom Brevoort in the letters page defending them. People are like, I don't know if we need them that much. And Tom Brevoort's like, yeah, but everybody said that about Giant Size X-Men in 1974. Here's the difference, Tom Brevoort. In 1974, we only had 7 other X-Men. And all of those characters created by Len Wein and Dave Cockrum were cool. Dave Cockrum was amazing at creative characters. You can't compare these nobodies to Storm. And not just because we've been reading about Storm for 50 years now, but because Storm is an inherently interesting character with a very obvious power. She's from Africa. She controls the weather. Nightcrawler is from Germany. He looks like a demon. He teleports. Like, these are, now try to explain these characters that way. You can't, because they're so gobbledygooky. This one dude, I don't even remember who all they are because I hate them so much. This one dude, what is his name? Ransom. He's got strong guy's power. He absorbs kinetic energy and then he throws it out. Okay, we kind of know who he is. So then there's Jitter, who has a stutter, and she remembers everything that somebody can do, which is Prodigy's power, but she can only use it 1 minute of a time in an hour. Like, we have so many characters that can already do that. Isn't there also Synapse who can do that? Then we have this other character, Calico, who has a horse, but the horse is dead, but the horse is a horse, of course, and so she can make armor for her horse, but only if the horse is there. No one's ever going to know what her power is, and it's not cool, and it's not interesting. And then Death Dream, who is dead, but maybe he's not dead, but he also talks to the dead, and he can get the dead to do what he wants. Again, too amorphous. So we have these 4 characters with these totally amorphous powers and these totally amorphous personalities, and we're centering every issue of this book on them. And it's, Gail Simone would be bad no matter what was happening writing this book. She just fundamentally doesn't understand what the X-Men are about or who these characters are, and that's shown every time she has to write a single caption box for Gambit or Rogue. She just thinks if she makes one joke about Gambit's balls or Rogue having her period, that it's like, haha, I know these characters. No, Gail Simone, you have a totally prurient obsession with sex, and you think that if you mention a little bit of genitals in one of your books, it's going to be like, tee hee ha ha, these are real people. But that's the thing that you, along with Fiddle Kelly Johnson, need to go to therapy for, because we don't need that to laugh about X-Men. If you were actually an X-Men fan or knew anything about mutants or anything about these characters, you would write something we would actually laugh at, except instead of talking about Rogue being on her period. And I'm all about period parody. I think everybody around the world, it's crazy that we have a whole gender of people that we treat as second-class citizens because we don't give them supplies or treat them like they should have that taken care of normally for them the way that they should. But like, the way to get that across is not making a joke about how Gambit doesn't like to talk to Rogue for 1 week out of the month. It just makes me so angry. I've never seen somebody so incompetent with X-Men. The thing is, I don't hate Gail Simone. I've liked many of Gail Simone's other comic books. I like her stupid, prurient, transgressive sex stuff when she does it in other comic books. But to get on the main stage of the flagship X-Men book, to have known nothing about the characters, to have all of their voices wrong, to introduce your 4 characters who make no sense at all. And what is this story? It's basically that they see a horror movie about mutants and the killers of mutants, so they think that that's going to be bad for mutants all around the world, and it's selling a lot, which is kind of this like thinly veiled trans metaphor that they're like, oh, every time somebody who's bad, who's trans, is in the media, everybody hates trans people. I'm like, I see you trying to do that, Gail Simone, but stop trying to do that. You're not good enough to do that in this book. Maybe on some other book, but X-Men, it's just, there's nobody to rely on, there's nobody to appeal to, there's nobody to connect to, and it's just all kind of like blah, 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 and then it just ends. So like, why did we read this issue? How could you possibly compare these characters to characters created by Len Wein and Dave Cockrum, or even characters created by DeFilippis and Weir in their New Mutants, or even characters that were then written about by Kyle and Yost? How could you even compare it to Jason Aaron writing in Wolverine and the X-Men? Because these characters are jokes and there's nothing about them that's appealing, and yet we're centering this whole book on them because, surprise, you don't actually have anything to write about any of the other characters. This book is just a whole book about nothing that's masquerading as an Uncanny X-Men book. Johnny saying Gail is a hit or miss author and Uncanny X-Men is a massive miss. Awful. Awful comic. Logan Wayne saying, so Simone closing in on certain... Look, I'll read that Chuck Austin X-Men run 100 times a day, because you know why? Chuck Austin used sex as a weapon in his book, and it was funny. It had to do with who the X-Men were. Was it perverse? Yes. Did we need it in an X-Men book? Not necessarily, but Chuck Austen was given the remit to make it soap opera, and the sex was part of the plot. Gail Simone will have a whole issue about Gambit talking to a dragon for some reason that has no plot in it whatsoever, and at one point Gambit would be like, my beignets are feeling cold. That's not funny. Yeah, and for Gail Simone, Kane saying severely low-hanging fruit to make a joke about female menstruation. Many of us get a bad rap as it is, being made fun of, accused of being on the rag when we're upset. It's depressing. And for Gail Simone, she of women in refrigerators, look, man, I'm just one non-binary person in the world. I don't have a definitive take on anybody's genitals, okay? I'm just existing in my own third space. But I'm just saying that, to me, that seemed like it was in really poor taste. Okay. Let's just move on to something else. This is The Unchosen, which is written by one of the artists of Gail Simone's X-Men, David Marquez, doing his first creator-owned book. Now, I will say that something that's colored by Marissa Louise, by the way, I found this not that great art-wise, and I like Marissa Louise's color on a lot of things. I have come to realize that a lot of what I associate with David Marquez's art is him being colored by two colorists in specific at Marvel. One of those colorists is, rest in peace, Justin Posner, who was incomparable. And the other one is Matthew Wilson. So I'm sure he chose Marissa Louise for a reason on his indie book. Like, he could have chosen whoever he wanted. It's his book. But I just find that, like, his art just isn't as impressive when it doesn't have that textural element. She's coloring him so clean. This is the one page that felt like it had some, like, rough on it. And this page was really, really cool. So we see at the beginning that there's this girl who's caused a massive explosion. Kind of like the beginning of Zeb Wells' Amazing Spider-Man run. And we don't know why, and they have to protect her or take her away. So then we cut away from that, and now she's at this magic school. It's a magic school, like we've seen 100 magic schools in other stories. And some of the kids are good at their magic powers, and she's not yet. So that felt like very anonymous. Like, wow, you're kicking off your comic book with this? But then we flash back to after she made this giant crater, and we see that people are fighting over her, and there's all sorts of people with interesting powers in this world, and they're all vying for the chance to kind of shepherd this person with this new uncontrollable power into the universe. This is interesting. It's like, what if we started out one of these Chosen One books with, instead of following them on their whole journey, they're unconscious on the ground and we see everybody like fighting over them in that moment to give us the context of like, wow, they're pretty chosen. That worked for me. That said, this was just too short. I just think at an image number one, it didn't give me any information. Like, I don't like any of these characters yet. I don't know what the story is. I don't know what it's about. I know there's some kind of school and I know she's got some kind of power. I just think that we've seen a lot of image creators do a smart move and have a double-sized first issue that's like 40 or 50 pages. I know that blows a lot of your wad up front, especially when you're a writer artist, but I just don't think this was enough. I will keep reading it because I like David Marquez, and honestly, for a writer artist, the dialogue in this was great. There was no point that I was like, oh, you need an editor, oh, this is kind of cringe. I just never had that moment in this whole issue. I just think that it wasn't enough story for a number one issue to make me go like, wow. So I will keep reading it, and I don't think it's bad. And this whole fight that they had at the end was intriguing. I think the color is a little too clean for his art. I want to see more texture on his art, and I just don't know what it's about yet, really. So there you go. Okay. I didn't read Vampire Queen of Miami, a Dark Veil comic, which is also a Space Between comic, which is also by Pat Shand. Who can keep track? I did, however, read Wild Animals, and wow, I don't know if I could go on for a minute on this book. This was just so bad. It's Ed Brazon. Apparently, I just decided to keep putting the credits in the main PDF at a point. Art by Andy Kuhn, colors from D. Cuniff and Rob Jones. Look, I know some people will like this book. And it's about this kid. His mom has cancer. His mom dies of cancer. His dad was a police officer who got killed by dirty cops out of the line of duty. So now he's just this loser. He has no money for college. He's barely keeping a job at a convenience store. And he's like, what if I just got revenge on this whole system? Which, like, is attractive and is very grounded in the real world. And the thing is, I actually know, not an off-duty cop, but somebody in my life when I was a kid who literally was murdered by dirty cops in front of her kids. The fun, deep crisis lore. Not really fun. Actually incredibly tragic. And I think about it all the time. And so, like, part of me was like, oh, okay, I can, and the reason he looks like he's got scaly stuff is because in that fight, a pot of hot oil was dumped on him. And so he's not only lost his dad, but he's been scarred. But like, there's just nothing really to this book. Like, he's angry about it. So then he beats up some shoplifters at his store and he's like, oh, I'm going to go kill those bad cops. And the art, I just don't feel like it communicates anything. Like, it's so rough. It kind of looks like the roughest ever Frank Miller art. So it's just, there's really no emotion. It's hard to get on his side, even though I'm predisposed to get on his side. And it's just ugly to me. Like, I know some people like this kind of art and they would be maybe into it, but it just felt very unpleasant. So then I got to Wolverine and Kitty Pryde. I'm sorry, the bad books are at the end of the alphabet. This is actually my third highest rated week of the year, but all of that good stuff was mostly by Patrick Zircher, and it was in the middle of the alphabet. So you got to just coast with me to the end of this roller coaster. This Wolverine and Kitty Pryde issue from Chris Claremont and David Cocciaro with colors from Carlos Lopez and letters by Ariana Mayer. I'm not even starting the clock. This was the worst Chris Claremont nonsense you could possibly imagine, which is crazy because the first 2.5 issues of this book were like, wow, this feels like classic Claremont. This fits right in with the original Kitty Pryde and Wolverine series from 1984. But now all of a sudden there's an AI that's been made from the combination of Kitty's personality and this little kid from the Trask family, but then they get knocked out of their bodies, which also become automatons, and so then they have a conversation in the psychic plane and they jump back into their bodies, but their bodies are switched. It's kind of like if somebody on the editorial team was like, Claremont, give me every trope that you're known for and every trope that you've ever done and roll it into one book and just make sure that it is completely incoherent and there is no story whatsoever and it's just hard to figure out what's happening page to page. And that is what this issue was. And it was, in fact, at W, our last issue of the week, which means strangely there were no Spawn books this week, which is pretty rare. Okay, I made it to the end, so glad we made it. Look how far we've come now, baby. It's gonna take a lifetime to read all of these shitty comics. Okay, but actually, there was a lot of really good comics this week, just not any good ones at the end of the alphabet. So I did see some very interesting dialogue going on, and I'm just going to scroll up, I guess, to where I was going on about being non-binary, and we'll just scroll down from there, because I think that that's where I stopped getting quite as many of the comments. But, so we talked about magic. Super Panda was finally able to make it here live, and I am happy that you did, my friend. I think we got this earlier, Z saying, I don't even know why regular hardcovers exist. Well, the thing is, like, Marvel and DC got away from doing regular hardcovers for like a really long time. And I think it was because the market trended more to trade paperbacks. Like, people wanted to buy trade paperbacks because that's what manga comes out in. That's what like OGN's, original graphic novels of YA stuff comes out in. So like the market for standard side hardcovers kind of disappeared. Like, there was no, it used to be like, oh, of course you would put out a hardcover before you put out a softcover. And then people realized that like, there was no market for that. So now some of the publishers are doing it again. DC is doing standard hardcovers and paperbacks for every ultimate or every absolute book. That's weird. Marvel is now going back to doing hardcovers for some of their books. They're kind of prestige, but they're not oversized. I completely agree with you. I don't understand. All that a hardcover has as a format is that it's a little bit more durable. So I could see you putting out, maybe if it was like a 12 issue series and there was like, oh, it's this whole 12 issue series. Like, we're going to put out all of Dark Patterns as a standard size hardcover. Now it should come out as like an absolute, but I could see that because it's like, okay, it's 12 issues. It's a little bit more prestigious. A trade feels like it's going to fall apart. We're going to put it out straight to hardcover. That makes sense to me, even if it's not oversized. But to take like a 3-issue series, even if they're all double length and it's really 6 issues, and start with a hardcover and not make it oversized, I don't understand the math there. I'm gonna have to put my glasses back on. I just sometimes want to break from them. It's just a long time looking at the screen. Super Job talking about Zenoscope's comics. Is it weird that Neverland randomly has a male protagonist? Zenoscope switches the gender of Sherlock Holmes and Robin Hood so they have Cheesecake, but randomly kept Captain Hook male. It's weird. Well, I feel like it's like you kind of need a couple of male characters in there for drama. And since Neverland is usually like a Peter Pan Captain Hook thing, but I would really dig a lady Captain Hook. For sure. Bitman Pal also heavily dislikes Radiant Black and feels seen. We're always here to see you, Johnny. Superjob liked Radiant Black more than me, but does agree that Rogue Sun is a standout book. And then we get to everybody just losing their mind over me losing my mind about Savage Dragon. Cruel Angel saying, is this the first time we've seen Krisis not being able to breathe? I mean, I've read a lot of crazy comic books. I've been through it. I've read the gamut. It's really hard to really shock me in a comic book, and not in like a Gail Simone, like, this is shocking, Gambit's balls, Rogue is a period, but like shocking in a like, what? And when the kid's like, I'm just a 10-year-old, I want to have an adventure with you. And the guy's like, let's talk about sex trafficking. They're like, it goes so much farther than the Gail Simone joke, but also it's on Savage Dragon, which is already a book about sex that shows sex in general, so all the time. So it's not like, actually the funniest thing about it was that it wasn't that shocking. It was like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot because we had this really cute kid sequence. This is actually what this comic book is. If that makes any sense. Okay. Eric Larson isn't the writer we deserve, but the writer we need. And Adrian Montanez, who unfortunately didn't get to a lot of your comments because I was just flying, saying we're in the era of Conan. I'm so happy. Yeah, it just feels like I just look back at that Marvel 2018 Conan revival and I was like, it was just nothing. Like there were a couple of good issues here and there, and I was looking back at my comments on some of them, but it just kind of like, it just happened. Like it didn't ever feel like Marvel had a really good plan. They just threw different writers at him. And a couple of interesting things happened. I mean, Jib Zub did start writing it towards the end, and he's a remarkable Conan writer now, but it kind of just feels like it just passed by. Savage Dragon is another of the series. I've read all the issues in the last issues. Oh wow, Superjob. I feel like Superjob should be our special correspondent, like reporting live from having read all of this bullshit, so you don't have to. Let me explain Zenoscope to you. Let me explain Savage Dragon to you. Can't wait to see Titan do a whole series of Call. I hope it's as good as the Conan titles. Yeah, and I really respect that even though Titan has been pumping out the omnibuses, they have been kind of very slowly but surely releasing, the books. We started out just with Conan for like a whole year, and then we got Savage Sword of Conan. Now we have a Solomon Kane book. Like I respect that, and it feels like they're really waiting for the right creators to arrive for the books. Javier Hernandez arrived here sort of on the late side, but that's fine. We welcome you. Pitama saying Conan, Savage Sword of Conan, Solomon Kane are my go-to reads as they come out. I love the lore and adaptations. Yeah, it's just really, really great stuff. And then we pretty much make it. Oh, somebody was saying, is there going to be a new Toxic Avenger movie? I have no idea. James Abel about Uncanny X-Men enjoyed the first half, but then it was all about the new X-Men. That is when the issue lost its way, trying to tell a story that's been told over and over again. Yes, I agreed. Yana Apples is like, but I will defend Horse Girl. I can't defend any of it, unfortunately. And Johnny's saying, at least Chuck Austin runs was interesting. Not good, but interesting. At least he was trying stuff. And I do agree with that. Jamie C47 saying this Wolverine and Kitty Pryde, this really dropped off a cliff. Okay, I'm glad it wasn't just me. Like, I was like, did I do that thing where I just thought I liked the first couple of issues, but it was horrible all along? No, it was cool at the beginning, and then it stopped being cool. What's with the rushed friendship with Kitty? Bad art and action. I like Carmen Pride, though. Johnny did not like the story of Wild Animals, although he did like the art. Logan Wayne with an AMA. How do I feel about the idea of Kitty and Ileana being a couple? Old school fans find it weird because of Peter, but younger fans love it, and I find Peter weird and creepy for obvious reasons. He was 13 and she was 14. Without in any way defending that, I will just say that that was a very common narrative in fiction at that time. Like the idea of like a 14-year-old girl who like had a crush on this guy who's like just about college age, and then him like reciprocating her affections. I'm not excusing it. I'm not saying I welcome it. I'm just saying if you go back and look at media from the early 80s, like that was a trope. That was a thing. So I agree. We should completely repudiate it in the modern day, but I also think it's like weird to make it sound like Claremont was uniquely strange for doing it, because it was very much a trope. That said, I like the idea that Kitty just can't figure out how to be happy in general. And like now she's leaning into her bisexuality and she's dating a girl. But I think there's like something very much about like Kitty needs to take possession of herself and her own identity, which I think we saw a little bit in Marauders. And that was a period where she wasn't romantic at all and she was fully being Kitty. And it kind of feels like anytime she's giving part of herself to somebody else, no matter who that is, she's just not fully realized as a person yet. And in a way, she gets into these relationships to get away from addressing who she really ought to be. And I really strongly believe that about Kitty. So I don't think there's any like perfect ship for Kitty. I think Kitty absolutely has romantic tension with Rachel. I think she absolutely has romantic tension with Ileana. However, in my personal headcanon, for me, and I don't really ship people generally, to me, Ileana is aromantic. Maybe not asexual, but aromantic. And I did talk about that with Oatfall when we did Map My Magic. So like, I don't know that I believe that Kitty and Ileana ought to be together. However, I do see it. And if somebody were to actually make that canonical, which they kind of almost hinted at right around when Rogue and Gambit were getting married. Well, I guess it was meant to be Kitty and Peter getting married. They like kind of sort of hinted for 1 second that Ileana had mixed feelings about it. And I was like, oh, there's somebody who's like finally almost making it textual. Super drop from 3 Spawn books last week to none this week. And it's not like I skipped any. There just weren't any out this week. I often, that's an interesting thing about like release windows. Like I was saying, I think it's a little bit weird that like the Miles book and the Incursion book were out this week. I think it's sometimes weird when Batgirl is out the week as Birds and Prey. But that's for me as a digital reader. I think in a physical comic book store, the idea used to be spread your books out across the month so people would keep coming back to the store every week. But now it's kind of like people are busy. They might miss out on it. If there's a secondary book that has the same character as the primary book, just put them both out in the same week. Let that person show up and see the other book on the shelf that same week and buy it and then start to pull it. So I do think that we've kind of come back around. And so now I think all the publishers are starting to gang things up in the same weeks in a way that they did not as much in the past. Adrian Montanez is currently reading Titan Scarlet Couture, The Munich Files. I have no idea what that is. I really like the art, but God, it is wordy. I like it's like the author decided to adapt his movie script word for word. I haven't even seen that. Oh, you know what? It's next week. There's a Titan book next week. I'll save it for next week, and I'm gonna have to skip it. So I can't fully say that the recommendation index is perfect because it's a book I need skipped, and you will find out why next week. So, am I on the Near Mint Condition Marvel DC catalog streams? When are they? Well, here's the thing. The DC catalog streams, DC currently does not give out their catalog in advance. So the DC catalog streams basically are just going over the PRH catalog when it happens. And Dom is the master of that. He understands what's going on DC's side even more than I do. He reads all the books. He knows all of the collections. He's really well versed. And so that's kind of Dom's show. And I would love to be invited, but my time is at such a premium right now that I don't even know if I would have the time. If he did invite me, and I'm sure I could reach out to him and ask to be on. I'm friends with Dom. But so I don't do DC solicits because that's like Dom's game, and Dom has his own guest hosts that appear on that. He has his own Domiverse, but it's on Near Mint Condition. Marvel solicits, we've been getting them kind of slowly. It used to be that we always knew when we were going to get them, and it was always the last Thursday of the month or the first Thursday of the next month. And the past couple months, they just have not been arriving. And on the Marvel solicits, we actually do them from the actual Marvel catalog. So we don't want to just do it based on PRH or something. We actually want to go through the Marvel catalog. So the problem is, I know it seems like I'm eternally online, but I do have other things I'm responsible for in life. And it's one, I'm really good at scheduling things ahead. So when I know I have to be there one of those 2 Thursdays, Omar knows, I know, everybody knows. This week, we're going to see if we get the catalog. And if we do, we're going to try to do it, I think, on Wednesday. But like that gets really difficult for me because I have to rearrange the whole rest of my life. So I don't want to not be part of the catalog crew. I love being part of the catalog crew. I love being on that show. It's kind of begat this show in a way because I was like, I want to talk about stuff more at length, and I don't want to like force all of my opinions to be the only thing anybody hears in the solicit show. But right now there's just logistical stuff happening with that is getting in the way. Logan Wayne remembers that conversation with Odefell about if Ileana is asexual or a romantic. Cedric and Ellen is, there's a trope I hate. It's a man who marries the orphan girl that he raised. Ooh, yeah, creepy. Past midnight here for Hank. I'm officially turning 39. Happy birthday to Hank. And I have to get some sleep and plan ahead for my future midlife crisis. Have a great week anyway. And don't have a crisis unless it's me. That's the rule. That's the rule. Carlos King, so I don't think I've said hello to on this whole stream, but hello to you. Do I recommend reading the current Titans run? I've heard mixed reviews. I would actually start reading it from the Tom Taylor Titans run that began in 2023. It was really good. I think the art was great. It was one big story. The crossover event titled Beast World was very much just an extra arc of Titans. Very fun, very pleasing. I think the consensus we're currently coming to in the current run, written by John Layman, primarily drawn by Pete Woods, and we were talking about last week on the show, is that we really like the one-off nature of the stories, but it's starting to feel like it's really relying on the Titans being bad communicators with each other in order to advance the plot. And at a point, that just starts to get kind of boring. But I do think it's featuring the team really well. I think the problem with the Taylor run was it was very Nightwing and Beast Boy heavy and Raven. It was Nightwing, Beast Boy, and Raven, and they often get the most focus anyway. So it's kind of like, okay, yes, we've done this. Whereas the current run by John Layman is really spreading it around, and it feels like there's a lot of focus on Donna Troy, but also on Cyborg. There's still Raven and Beast Boy in the mix. There's still, we have some Starfire. It kind of just feels like everybody's getting play. And for me, I just like Titans more when everybody gets play. So I think it's good. I mean, it was in my top 60. I would recommend just starting from the Taylor, personally, because I don't think the Layman run is substantial enough on its own. But I think if you've read the Tom Taylor run, it's a good continuation. And guess what? We're at the bottom of the chat, and it's only a little bit over 3 hours, so we're going to call it. So look, this is going to be a busy week in the world of Crisis. Tomorrow, whether that's Monday or Tuesday for you, I don't know where you live, tomorrow is going to be me on Near Mint Condition talking about all of the Marvel omnibuses announced from February to July of 2026. There's a ton of them. If you've been waiting for me to talk at length about things like the Messiah Complex omnibus, if you want to hear my opinions on, I don't know, what else is in that release window, Uncanny X-Men by Kieran Gillen, I will be unleashing all of that live with Omar tomorrow. I don't know if other people are joining us. I just know I will be there. Then I have already set up the whole next pull list stream, and I'm already into the reading. I do think there's a strong chance by Thursday of this week you will see another pull list on this channel. So turn on your notifications, because also, as I just mentioned, I may also be on Near Mint Condition again for a solicit stream, and you'll just have to see what that happens. Once I start having a schedule that's more predictable, I will start making posts on the YouTube channel about the schedule. Right now, it's kind of all up in the air. Then next week, more pull list. I have a haul around the world that's waiting to be opened downstairs, but I have to still keep going through pull lists. I have to get through another 5 to be caught up, or 4 4 now, 5 as of next week. And next week I will be jamming on comics with Omni Dog and Freddy. So I will be on YouTube pretty much every day this week. You're not going to be able to escape me. I don't know how I'm going to survive it. Life is going to be very busy, but you know what? It looks like it's a beautiful day outside in Wellington, and we're going to just take each day as it comes, and maybe even get to the pool one day this week. So if you've been with me this whole time, thank you so much for hanging out. This is I just love the community that you've all built. I mean, I'm just here talking. You're the ones in the chat who make this good vibes. I love when somebody has a question, everybody jumps to answer it before I can even highlight the chat. And I just love the opinions that you bring. And I want to continue to make it so that when you disagree with me about Gail Simone, about Philip Kennedy Johnson, about Mark Russell, that we can all have a conversation about that and still be vehement. It's fun to be vehement sometimes about things. It's fun to rant and rave, but still support each other and enjoy each other's comments even when we vehemently disagree. That's the energy I need you to take from this stream and bring out to the rest of the world right now. Everybody needs you to be vehement about the things you love and vehement about caring about other people. And we can do both of those things and still find some times to rant and rave and still support the other people in our life. Trans rights are human rights and people's identities deserve respect. Me, the pronouns, I don't care so much. If somebody else tells you that they have pronouns or they want to be called by a certain name, even if they're just experimenting. I mean, here's some Crisis deep lore. Before I was like fully okay with saying that I was non-binary here on the internet for all to see. I mean, I have family members who I have not talked to for literally a decade who maybe have searched up this channel and are being like, oh, they're non-binary? That's news, which is strange, but we'll leave that for another time. The deep crisis lore is, I kind of understood that on my own, and I had that big come to Jesus moment where I read about Grant Morrison being non-binary, and I was like, oh, that makes sense, which I've talked about before. But the place that I really experimented with it was just in a random Discord where a couple people knew me, and I was like, hey, let's start using they for me. And they're like, they? You don't use they as a pronoun. But it was a Discord where everybody respected pronouns. I'm like, just use they for me. I'm trying to figure out what it feels like. And you know what? It actually felt good, but I decided the feeling that felt good was the feeling of acknowledging it myself and not just everybody else calling me they. And that's where we got to where we are right now. So I sell that deep crisis lore story. Even if somebody in your life is like, hey, can you just try calling me she, her pronouns for a couple of weeks? Just trust them, y'all. It's so easy to just trust people. It doesn't affect you. All it is a little chance. And if you make a mistake, guess what? The secret is nobody's going to get that angry. All you got to do is she, ooh, sorry, I meant he. Or like they, ooh, sorry, I meant she. That's all you have to do. You don't have to be like, oh, I forgot because one time I saw their genitals at the pool. Like, that's not necessary. It's so easy to just let people figure out who they want to be in the world. In the same way that if I turned up 1 week in purple hair, you'd be like, cool, your hair is purple. If somebody decides that they want to use different pronouns or a different name, just roll with it, y'all. And let's bring the vehemence that we have about comics to the vehemence to just roll with it. Because you know what? I want you to go out in this world this week, have a good time, treat other people well, try to enjoy some comic books, try to do something good for yourself and your body. And what I don't want you to do is have a crisis, unless of course it's any other day of this week on YouTube, in which case that crisis might be